Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of There's Still Time, the AFTN Soccer Show. I'm your host, Michael McCall, and I'm joined tonight by a motley crew. We're joined by Zachary Adam Meisenheimer.
Hello, Michael.
Steve Pander.
Adios, Michael.
Adios, that means goodbye.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to take Spanish in high school.
And Stephen Egan, all the way from sunny, misty, foggy, some kind of Seattle. And your mic is not working, Stephen. We'll try that again. Don't know what's happened to your mic. You can join us at some point, Stephen.
Hi, Michael. Sorry about that. Thanks for having me. Glad to join you from smoggy Seattle here.
Yes, and you, of course, out of the four of us, was the only person that was actually at that game tonight. You have my sympathy, except you're not a Whitecaps fan, so I guess congratulations.
Well, thank you. Frankly, there's not much more atmosphere there than there is watching it on television. But, great to be at the stadium, a great privilege. And another interesting derby in the book. Certainly.
Are you allowed to cheer at the stadium now that there's no supporters there?
We actually had a guy do it today, and everybody kind of looked at him and was like, oh, well, at least we heard something.
Well, we're going to be talking about, obviously, the big derby game of the week tonight. And that big derby game comes on Tuesday when East Fife season kicks off against Cowdenbeath. To celebrate that, I am wearing my No Soap in Cowden t-shirt, and Away from the Numbers original, dating back to the early 90s. We made 10 of those, and I actually sold those outside Cowdenbeath Stadium and lived to tell the tale. We might do some more because I was airing that and my Cowden family one on our East Fife show, and it seemed to go down well with the new East Fife captain. So we might be getting some new ones going out. But we might touch on East Fife later. We're going to talk a lot of Whitecaps. We're going to talk some MLS. We're going to look at the Gold Cup draw and whatever else we can throw in. We don't know how long this one's going to go. This is also going to be our podcast recording for episode 412. Now, we didn't do a show last weekend, partly because I just could not be arsed, partly because Steve found that he had orifices that he didn't know things could come out of. And
that was supposed to be private.
Oh, it's okay. No one will know. We'll cut it out the podcast. It'll just be live in the interwebs. And Zach was keen as mustard, but sadly couldn't make it because we couldn't. But we're back now. Before we get into the Seattle game and all the other stuff, let's quickly recap the two games that we didn't. Because, Stephen, did you watch the Whitecaps games against LAFC and the Timbers?
They were playing at the same time as Seattle for the LAFC game, and so I just watched Twitter light up with all the goal notifications, but I watched all of the Portland game.
Right. Just so I've got that. What I thought we'll do is TSN Radio kind of do a match in a minute. So I'm going to try and do the LAFC game in the case of a minute, and then we'll try and do the Portland game in a minute, and then just briefly talk about it. So LAFC, the game kicked off. It was over pretty quickly. 5-0 by about the 14th minute, or was it 4-0? I kind of started to lose counts. At some point, it got to the time in LA was 5 past Meredith, and everyone then is starting to look up what was going to be the worst ever Whitecaps defeat. Well, we know it was 6-0 in Kansas City. Then it was going to be what could be the worst ever MLS defeat. Could the Whitecaps be history makers? Sadly, we didn't even get that because either we shut up shop or LAFC just couldn't be bothered scoring anymore. One or the other. Finished 6-0. It was a shellacking. And yeah, I made the mistake then after that when Mark DeSantis gave his next pre-game press conference of asking him what locker room the Whitecaps were going to be in Portland and whether there was going to be any flags at the stadium. He did point out, he did say, with all respect, he said here how much he respects me. Basically, that was a ridiculous question. Why would he care about what flags were going to be there? The team just got beat 6-0. That's fair enough. I was worried going into the Portland game that it was going to be another thrashing, especially when they went 1-0 down after 4 minutes, but they held on and they did have their chances. And that's a common thread I think we might talk about tonight. Lucas Cavallini creating chances, not putting them away. Other players creating chances, not putting them away. Ended up a 1-0 defeat. 2 disappointing games, a lot of doom and gloom. You felt after that, oh, what's going to lie in store for the season? But going into tonight's game, just 3 points off the playoff places, still in the mix with 9 games to go. Got a chance to go home and visit family and friends. Revitalised, obviously, going to CenturyLink tonight. We'll come to that very soon. Thoughts, first of all, Stephen, on those 2 games against LAFC and Portland?
Well, first off, Michael, I want to address the banner thing, the flags that you just brought up. I find it wild that Mark Dos Santos didn't have a better answer for you on that. I do understand that it's after a 6-0 result, but I just actually a day or two ago saw on Facebook from AFC Wimbledon, who's participating in a ground share with QPR this season. They put out
and I'm wearing my Wimbledon hat tonight.
Oh, there we are. Great. They put out a call asking their fans for flags and banners and anything that they can put up in the stadium to try and make it feel a little bit more like home. I'm genuinely surprised that Mark Dos Santos and the players don't have an interest in that as well, playing in Portland. That being said, I thought they did everything in Portland except for get a result and except for score a goal. All in all, I thought there was a lot in the performance to build off of, but just, obviously couldn't put the ball in the net.
I mean, to be fair to Mark, I think he took it that I was asking him if he knew what was happening in terms of he was organising it. And I didn't. I maybe shouldn't have mentioned the flag aspect, but I was genuinely curious what locker room they would be in because, of course, it was a home game. But we all know it wasn't a home game and Portland were at home. Portland did get to use their own locker room. The Whitecaps are using a third locker room that will be their locker room. So it's not the home, it's not the away. I thought it was a fun way to end the scrum. And I was like, that didn't go down very well. But that aside, Steve, what did you make of those 2 games? Because we haven't had a chance to talk to you about them.
Yeah, well, you gave me the night off from watching the LAFC game because you thought it might worsen my condition.
Yes.
So you beforehand you told me that. So I didn't watch that one at all, but I did see it kept buzzing on my phone, the scores and everything like that. So I saw that it was not worth even catching later on. But the Portland one, yeah, just tight game. You expected to. I didn't expect them to be in that game at all, but they actually kind of had a good showing there. But overall, not very good. Two good games there.
Zach?
Yeah, I mean, the LAFC was, just a horrific performance all around. And the Portland one, the Portland one. Let's talk a little bit more about that. It was 1-0, but Portland heavily rotated, heavily rested the rest of their squad for that game.
Yes, there was that. Yeah,
I heard someone, I can't remember who it is now, kind of give the perspective that one of Vancouver's issues is they can focus on defending well or trying to attack well, but not both in the same game. And I think that was the case in that game where, even though they created a few chances, they did fairly well in defense. But for whatever the second or third game in a row, couldn't put anything on the board. The other thing I'll tell you, I don't know, I can't remember all the details now, but in terms of the flags or banners or whatever, I don't know if they were restricted or whatever, but talking to some of the supporters, I know that the FO was in touch and just said that I think big stuff in the stadium was not possible, but the supporters did send along small stuff to hang in the team hotel and the room where they ate and all that kind of stuff.
They've got it up in the hotel.
Yeah.
But the thing is, MLS has got their virtual stadium everywhere.
That's very true.
And with all their advertisements, so they don't want flags in the way. And that one guy that was behind Curva is probably happy that there's no flags. So that's a bonus there.
I should point out as well, if anyone hears a weird kind of background noise, my dog is fast asleep and snoring her head off My fault for making her watch that Seattle game. But we live and learn, I guess. But if you do hear some snoring, it is her. It's not my wife. She is snoring, but she's upstairs with the door shut, so no one's going to hear that. But let's get to tonight's game, the Seattle game. I will point out as well that this episode is going to be marked explicit because the songs I'm going to be playing in the podcast is going to have swearing in it. So feel free to swear about anything that happened tonight because it was fucking terrible, let's be honest. At least the second half was. Now, let's kick things off. 3-1 defeat, which on paper doesn't look too bad, especially when you consider how that second half was going. It could very easily have been 7 or 8 if Seattle had taken some of those chances. It was a case of squandered chances, missed opportunities, and some top saves by Brian Meredith. I will give him lots of credit for that. I mean, that could have really got out of hand, Stephen.
Meredith had a very nice game. To start with the positives, I thought that Vancouver had a very, very good opening half. I thought that went almost as well as possible. Let's talk about the missed chance later, but aside from that, they really did awfully well, putting 2 blocks of 4 behind the ball, getting all 10 guys, all 10 outfield players behind the ball at times, closed down space very well, made it difficult for Jordan Morris to get in behind. At halftime, it felt like there was a path to 0-0. And I think that's maybe the best thing you can say for Whitecaps on the night. As you mentioned, almost everything else hard to find a positive in.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, when you saw the team, guys, it's like it wasn't an exciting team in some ways, but they got the front 4 out there that they wanted to have on the pitch. I had a hunch that MDS was going to go for 4-4-2. And Andy Rose then moved into the middle. I think he was playing solely because Leonard Owusu got injured and was missing out. I think it would have been Owusu and Bikel otherwise. But I mean, Cornelius and Godoy, Adnan back at left back, Meredith in goal was maybe the only surprise, but maybe Bush isn't fully up to match day yet. But when you saw that team, I don't think there's a lot more they could have maybe done. But maybe put Baldy in instead of Andy Rose. But Mark did talk afterwards that he felt he needed some experience in there because of how much experience was on the Seattle side. So that is kind of why he went for Rose. But it was a decent enough lineup, and it was a decent enough first half. For Seattle, I thought Nicholas Ladero in that first half was absolutely outstanding. Cava got that chance. Point blank save by Stefan Freizak that you feel if that had gone in, things may have been different. But that aside, it was another good opportunity for Cava that he didn't put away. And that's what DPs all around the league are putting away.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like from a Whitecaps perspective that is the one thing you can look at and say, oh, maybe that was the turning point. Like if Vancouver had scored then they could have, they could have maybe held on or something, or come into the game more than they did on the whole. I think one of the interesting stats that TSN put on before the game, I know with our good friend Naveed and others, we've been talking a lot about the MDS era and the stats or whatever. One of the stats that MDS or that TSN showed before the game about the MDS era is that in games where his side has not scored first, I think they have 1 win. I think it was 19 losses and 3 draws, which is really concerning, and which makes a miss like that even more concerning.
Yeah, I mean, MDS was asked about that after the game. He didn't really have an answer for it. Now did Andy Rose. It's a baffling stat. In the whole MDS era, 1 win when the team has fallen behind. Now, I mean, Stephen, you don't watch the team all the time, but you do follow the results. And you're used to watching a team like Seattle that when they fall behind, you feel they've got what it takes to get back into the game. We simply don't have that with the Whitecaps. When we fall behind, you kind of feel, oh, well, that's it. It's game over.
Yeah, I think what Zach said a moment ago, or a little earlier, was really a great point. Whitecaps can attack or they can defend, but they can't do both. Certainly not in the same game. It's just it just doesn't seem to happen. It seems like after the first goal goes in, there's just the game's done. And maybe the best positive Whitecaps can take from this is it took Seattle longer to score 3 times in this one than it did in Orlando. But it's just, I don't know. I go back to the Cavallini chance. I think that if you know that that's the setup, if you know that you're a big underdog, you're not going to create very many chances, you're going to sit in and absorb a lot of pressure, then when you have a golden chance like that, you have to take it. And sure enough, there's not another one in the game that's as relevant for Whitecaps the whole time. To just talk about Seattle for a sec, I know you guys probably don't want to hear this, but they were bad in the first half. They were complacent. They didn't connect passes well. They looked like they straight up took the Whitecaps for granted. And Whitecaps very nearly made them pay for it. I was hoping they would, to be honest. I thought that Whitecaps were better in the first half and probably should have had a goal, particularly through Cavallini, like we talked about. But Seattle just, nobody beat anyone one-on-one in the first half. Morris couldn't get in behind at all. Nerwinski did way better today. Adnan did way better defensively than they did in Orlando. But then Seattle looked interested in the second half, and it's a different story.
Steve,
for the Whitecaps, for me, the fact that I noticed it in this game and I noticed it in previous games, as soon as they let that first goal go in, there's a different mentality to the team on the pitch. Their heads go down. Even if they make a defensive play where it goes for a corner, they're still, their heads go down even if they're behind. It seems like they're almost defeated by that first goal. And I rarely ever see them where, like, it is obviously by the stats you gave that it's true that they don't come back from games. And I think it's all mentality at this point.
You're a goalkeeper, Steve. Are we being too harsh on Cavallini? Could he have done better there? Should we give Fry a lot more credit for making that save?
Yeah, I think Fry deserves credit. The fact that he was able to get, big and spread out and get his feet on there. It was more of a reflection save, but Cavallini still, for him, it was almost like a reflex shot too. He had to react quickly to the pass coming in. Obviously, top of the line strikers probably would have got that, and I think that he probably should have finished that, especially for a team that's desperate for goals.
Don't get me wrong, Stefan Fry is a top quality goalkeeper, especially in MLS. But that was virtually right at him. I think he would even, by his standards, would not consider that a massive save beyond, I guess maybe the situation.
But it's about positioning too, Zach. If you're in the right position, you're going to make that save. Look at a couple of things Meredith did. He wasn't in the right position, and that's why the goals went in. Yeah. And so but the thing is also it says a big thing about the Whitecaps that if they miss that chance, that's the telling point of the story of the game. They can't, if they don't get that goal, and they're not going to get any more chances than that. They're so concerned about missing one.
So yeah, full credit to him on his positioning. But again, because his positioning is in, let's say, the upper echelon of the league, it's right at him. But from Cavallini's perspective, he should not be shooting so directly at where the keeper is. I know it was quick and all that, but you're right. He didn't pull a Diop or anything. So
yeah. Now, at halftime, I've put this in our match report. It kind of felt like a small victory for the Whitecaps because they'd gone in level against the leaders of the Western Conference. Now, the second half was about to get underway, and my wife was going to take our dog out. So I said to her, I hope the second half's pretty quiet so that I don't have too much to write about so I can get ready for the show later. So by the time she'd come in from walking the dog, there'd been 4 goals, a sending off that wasn't a sending off, and a sending off that was a sending off. It was an amazing dog walk for her, but let's try and make some sense of this second half. Now,
can I say one thing?
Yeah, that
I kind of appreciate the referees we had in Canada a little bit more, and even in the CPL games after this guy, Timmy Smith or Tommy Smith or whatever his name was. He was atrocious, but for both teams.
Timothy
Like there were some
Ford, was it?
bad, huh? I don't
Timothy
know.
Ford, I think it was.
Whatever his name is, Timmy Smith. But for me, like even in the first half, with that there was a foul that a Sounders player did on a Whitecaps attacker just outside the box, which was a foul. And then you got Cavallini's one, which we'll talk about later. That wasn't a foul. I don't understand where this guy's head was at.
I messaged you guys right at kickoff.
Yep.
He called a foul right at kickoff and then made Vancouver retake the free kick because he didn't like that they took it too quickly. It was like I told you, it's like this is an interesting referee.
Yeah.
It feels like he's used to U11s or something like that playing or something like that.
Yeah, he was bad. He was poor.
Well, I tell you who else was poor. The Whitecaps defending for the first 15 minutes of that second half. So it's 1-0 down after, I think it was about 52 seconds after the restart. Jake Nerwinski does a clearance, which Zach put in our WhatsApp group. Oh, good clearance by Jake. And then seconds later, bang, the ball comes back in. Andy Rose doesn't close down João Paulo. The ball goes through 3 Whitecaps defenders. Now, it was beautifully struck, and it was struck with force. But you have to think one of those 3 defenders is going to throw his body at that ball. And then I don't know if Meredith was expecting someone to throw himself at the ball, but then he just got down. I think he could maybe have done better with that as well. It was a lovely finish. It was a lovely strike. After that, you thought, that's it, game over.
It felt like, you know how you have like a bride and groom go down the pathway and the people put their swords up. It felt like that. The Whitecaps, the way they were positioned, they allowed that ball right to go in between the defenders.
Yeah, I mean, it was well struck for sure, and I said that in our conversation that we were having during the game. It was well struck, but again, I think Meredith will feel he should have got a hand to it and parried it around the post. But
well, that's where positioning comes in. I felt like he was too close to that post, the left one, whereas he should have been more centered in the pitch.
Even after all that time he spent with him, he's no Stephen Fry.
Now, before we go any further, we're after 10 o'clock, so it's AFTN after hours. I'm stunned that Stephen is the guy to have some pussy on the broadcast here. That was a big surprise. You guys obviously missed that. Stephen's cat got in the shot.
Oh, I still didn't see that.
And my other question for Stephen is, do you have some casks behind you?
No, they're frisbees. It's embarrassing. I play frisbee golf because I'm a nerd with very little life.
That was your chance to say there were casks.
What is that other game that they play? Frisbee is it frisbee football, or they have a different name for that too? I can't remember.
Well, they play Quidditch.
Ultimate, yeah, that's it. That's the ultimate.
Ultimate frisbee, yeah. I don't know. I've looked at disc golf because there's a where we walk Penny sometimes. It's like there's a disc golf course, and
Central Park.
No, Robert Burnaby Park.
Oh, okay.
And I've always thought it kind of looks a bit of a fun game. I wouldn't mind trying it. Not just now because I've done something to my shoulder, but once my shoulder's back up and running. So are you the disc golf champion then, Stephen?
Oh, goodness. No, I'm not very good, but it's great exercise. And frankly, it's a lot cheaper than playing actual golf for a college student in Seattle, where we don't have the greatest selection of courses. You have to book quite a ways in advance, and it's pretty expensive. This is free. It's wonderful. So I've really enjoyed it. Been playing for about a year now. But anyways, I'm sorry about the whole cat incident and the mess I've had here.
Look, I love looking at pussies on a Saturday night, so I'm totally fine by that. I have been watching a lot of Are You Being Served recently, which is a UK sitcom from the 70s that may or may not have been shown over here. And there's lots of innuendo in it. And one of the characters, Mrs. Slocum, her famous thing was she was always going on about, I have to get home and sort out my pussy.
Is that the one that's in the shopping store?
Yes, it's in a department store.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
Yeah,
Michael, no one finds it hard that you watched a show that had a lot of euphemism in it.
I think that's kind of that, and the Carry On films has shaped the kind of person that I am today.
That was one where one of the ladies had really blue hair or something like that.
Yeah, that was Mrs. Slocum. That's the woman
it.
that had the pussy as well. Yeah. She would do jokes like, she'd come in all rain, it'd been raining, and she'd be like, I'm sorry I'm late, but my pussy was so wet I had to just dry it off. Great humor. You don't get that anymore. Different times, Zach. Different times. Back to the football chat.
Zach,
Everyone...
keep checking if we're still on YouTube, by the way.
Yeah, I did say it was going to get marked explicit. It's fine. So it's 1-0. Whitecaps are down. And you think, yep, that's going to be the end of the game. But then things get worse. And it's an own goal this time. And Roldan sends the ball across the 6-yard box. Meredith should have done better with that hand. Just palms it straight off Godoy's leg into the back of the net. And I don't know what you saw in the stadium, Stephen, but on the TV, Godoy just had that resigned look of, oh, here we go again.
Too far away to see facial expressions in the stadium, but close enough to see that was game over for Whitecaps. Just going back to it, it seems like every inflection point in the match goes against Vancouver. The Cavallini miss, the goal at the start of the second half. You're still in it after that one, but then you give up another. It's just every time, right? And then even when something good happens, even when you get a penalty, right, then immediately the next thing that happens, you go down to 10 men. And it's just, It's like, when you're a big underdog in a soccer game, you have to take the key events of the match, make sure they go your way, or there's no way for you to win, right?
Either of you two want to jump in on thoughts on that second goal or even the third goal, which we'll cover as well. You can cover them both if you want.
Well,
Corner comes in. The
one thing about that goal, it ended up being at that point that since they moved to the U.S., Whitecaps players had scored 2 goals for their own team and 3 goals for the opposition.
Oh, really?
In the 4 games that they had played. So at that point, and obviously we'll get to the end score of that total.
Yeah, I feel bad for the Mobilio family. They're going to be handing out the Whitecaps Golden Boot to own goal this year for the combined efforts. But yeah, I mean, Meredith did make some good saves. I think the third goal, if you want to say his position was not great on the second, the third goal, I think he just parries it to the, like he puts it back into a massively wrong spot. Whether or not it hit Godoy and went in or not, that was not where you want that ball to end up. And like, he'll definitely not feel good about that.
Well, I mean, Stephen talked about bad luck. The third goal comes off the back of Jordan Morris. That's the bad luck aspect. But then you get the bad marking aspect, whereas you've got the dangerous Rui Diaz all alone in the 6-yard box, able to just go, boom, head home.
They had the positioning of a triangle around him with Meredith, Bikel behind him, and Rose in front of him. So they had that positioning. It just wasn't tight enough. I don't get zoning. I honestly, if I was a player on the pitch and they were told me to zone, and I see Rio Diaz right next to me, like 3 feet away, I'm going to move that extra 3 feet to get to him and be right beside him. I don't care what the coach says because I know that he's going to do something with that. So zoning, I don't understand. They have to really get away from it and figure something else out.
Yeah, sorry, I messed up which goal was which goal there, but yeah, the Rui Diaz goal, yeah, is really poor. It was really poor marking, and I think MDS was talking about it after the game about how everyone is really comfortable with how they're approaching set plays, and it was like, well, it hasn't really been working on the whole, so it feels like they need to relook at that.
They're comfortable because they don't have to do anything. They don't do anything, so they don't have to put any effort. That's why they're comfortable.
Yeah.
As the late great Ziggy Schmidt said, space doesn't score goals, people score goals.
Very true. The other thing as well is they're probably comfortable at training because they're defending Whitecap set pieces. It's like, oh, I'm really comfortable with that. We've managed to mop up everything and there's not been a goal conceded. So 58 minutes, it's 3-0. Let's be honest. Who thought we were on for another 6-0 shellacking? I certainly did. I
thought it was good. One of us is going to be asking what time it was for sure. I don't know about 6.
No, I thought at that time the Sounders would start taking it easy. I thought they would take the foot off the pedal a little bit.
Stephen, did you think it would be easing up, or did you think they would kind of go for the jugular?
In a vacuum, I would have probably thought that Seattle would start to sub people off and rest people for, get minutes off of legs as quickly as they could. frankly, the craziness with the penalty happened so fast that there wasn't really time to think about it.
Yes.
I do want to just mention one thing as far as the second goal goes. I've talked to a number of the Seattle radio broadcasters who swear that Meredith didn't touch the ball at all and that it only came off of Godoy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so
think he
I
was-
haven't seen
yeah.
it again myself, but that's what I've heard. So
I might try and watch that back during the broadcast here, see if I can. I've got it on the PVR.
I'll
because
look
we're glad for punishment.
I'll look it up right now and see if I can find it.
at the very least, we can laugh at the Seattle radio if they got it wrong. So it's one
That's
of the-
true. Although I do like Jackson. I don't want to laugh at Jackson. He gets me on his show. So
Oh no, he's one of my very closest friends.
I know.
But it's still fun to laugh. So
yes, and we have to laugh at something if we're a Whitecaps fan, because otherwise it'd be all doom and gloom. Mark's post-game press conference was not a lot of fun, as you would expect, but if he had been all jokey or whatever, he'd have got slammed for that as well. But this seemed to really hurt and kind of cut quick, and he kind of came across as a coach that's struggling for answers just now, and that's something we'll kind of come to later on. So it's 58 minutes, it's 3-0, then craziness happens, and we're going to get to that very soon. If you're listening to this on the podcast, we're going to take a little break now, and we will be back looking at the Whitecaps getting back into the match after this. And for those of you in the stream, we're going to look at it right now. So we're back talking Whitecaps Seattle. It's currently 3-0 after 58 minutes. And you're thinking, well, what is going to happen? Then a lifeline and a life jacket are thrown to the Whitecaps. Yema gets a red card. Penalty for the White. Try to make this as dramatic as possible. We're all sitting in our WhatsApp group going, how the fuck is that a penalty? A, it's outside the box. B, Cava pushed Yemar. C, it looked to me that Cavallini just dived as soon as he got into the box. And as soon as he went to VAR, we were all like, oh yeah, that's coming back. That's not a penalty. That's not a red card. Well, it wasn't a red card, but it was still the penalty, with the telling moment being Yemar's, or Gomez, I don't know what he goes under, but let's go with Yemar. His trailing foot, I'm demonstrating this for radio, which is great, but we are on YouTube, so we'll do that as well. His trailing foot was out like this. Let's do this. And then catches Cavallini's foot, and Cavallini then seems to stumble. But the reason his trailing foot catches him is because Cavallini's barged him to begin with and sent him down to the ground. So for me, it should have been a Seattle free kick. I was more concerned with how long it was taking, that Cavallini was actually going to get a second yellow for simulation at that point.
Yeah,
You
I
guys
mean,
mind if I jump in here?
Yeah,
Frankly, this was maybe the worst penalty call I've ever seen in person, to be completely honest. Michael, I think everything you said about it was completely right, except for Cavallini initiated the contact with Yemar, I think, at the end. The whole thing is initiated in the beginning by Cavallini elbowing or forearming Yemar in the back, and that's what causes him to stumble. That's, as Danny Jackson said tonight, the initial domino that goes. But if you guys would like, I actually have just received answers from the pool reporter from questions that I actually wrote myself, believe it or not, for the first time.
this is great.
it's great, except your sound's gone. Let's get your sound back. This is the exciting bit, and your sound's gone. You've got an exclusive for us, and your sound's disappeared, Stephen.
The Whitecaps Evo have cut it off.
Pro referees have got to Stephen.
Okay, I think I'm back.
He's
Can you
back. He's back.
Sorry about that, guys. Okay, here we are. What infraction caused you to call a penalty kick and send off Yemar? Gomez was penalized for a tripping foul in the penalty area, which denied an obvious goal-scoring opportunity, Dogso, and which the referee did not consider in real time involved an attempt to play the ball. What was discussed during your monitor review of the play? The video review enabled the referee to establish whether a foul took place, exactly where that foul took place, and whether the action of Gomez could be considered an attempt to play the ball. These were the factors that were considered during the review. And finally, what infraction occurred inside the area? After reviewing the footage at the pitch side monitor, the referee maintained his opinion that a tripping foul had occurred inside the penalty area when the left foot of Gomez made contact with the right foot of Cavallini, and as such, he maintained his penalty decision. He could also see that Gomez had actually attempted to play the ball and had been close to doing so just prior to the foul contact. As such, even though the actions of Gomez did deny an obvious goal-scoring opportunity, because it resulted in the award of a penalty kick and involved an attempt to play the ball, the correct outcome as per the laws of the game is a yellow card, and as such, the originally issued red card was rescinded and a yellow card was issued.
This is the whole thing is asinine. I agree with Michael's assessment. This is what we were talking about the whole time. Is when VAR is used to determine a red card, a penalty, the things it's allowed to do, it looks at it can go back as far as it's allowed to go back. And so for the example I gave the guys in our chat was, if someone is in an offside position and then fouled and the referee calls a penalty and VAR looks at it and they're like, oh no, it's offside, then the penalty isn't given. And there's no way, because you could even see over the referee's shoulder how he's looking at the monitor and what he's looking at. He looked at the initial contact and how he couldn't decipher that was a foul by Cavallini barging into the back of the defender. I don't want to mispronounce his name, but barging into his back that created the whole thing, and it wasn't stopped, and a free kick given for that is mind boggling. Like it is totally unacceptable that something like that can happen with a system like VAR.
Yeah. Also, it was Cavallini that was in on goal. So is it really a clear goal-scoring opportunity with what we've seen from him in the last few games? I mean, there is that as well. But for a referee to look at VAR and then come back and say, you know what? I've made 2 fuck-ups here that I have to correct. It would take a big referee to go, yeah, I balls that up twice. So I think he kind of went 50-50. Oh, yeah, I've only made 1 balls up. I'm not saying he was right, but
this is why I don't feel like the referee on the pitch should be making the call when reversing a VAR decision. It should be either the referee in the stadium, in the studio, whatever you want to call it, or somebody in a central location in New York, where you get the top person, whoever is in charge of all the refereeing in MLS, making that call. And they can do that because there's not that many games going on. You have one person watching each game, and then you have a central person making that final decision. They've done it in other leagues. I feel like the referee on the pitch is going to be, you get confronted or like saying that, being told you're wrong. And obviously, in the moment, when you're in the heat of the moment of the game, you're going to say, no, I wasn't wrong. I was right. Look, it's right here. You got to have fresh eyes looking at it and making that decision.
Well, Michael, it shouldn't matter. Like, this is not about how the referee comes off looking. This is about,
I know, I was half joking.
I know, but I agree with you, Steve. And from my understanding, essentially that's how it's done in Germany, Steve. It's in Cologne is the main center, and they often will tell the referee what it is. And I've seen multiple times in the Bundesliga where they don't even look at it. They're just like, oh, okay, yeah, no, that's, I'm whatever.
Well, Germany comes up with the best solutions, obviously.
That's how I would think if it ever gets introduced in the CPL, it should work. It's like it's done centrally somewhere in Toronto, because you can't maybe have all the setups at all the individual stadiums for costs and stuff. So I think that would work. I'd be all for that in MLS. What's your thoughts on that, Stephen? Would you like a more centralized approach?
I'm almost equally torn between the continuity you get from having that type of centralized approach and the importance of having the center ref be able to have the final decision stay in his hands. I guess I also want to mention that this wasn't VAR or video review justice for the Whitecaps tonight. I don't want to see them get a PK in a garbage, in garbage time in a game where there's no result. We all know Whitecaps get screwed by VAR more than any other team in MLS. I want to see these things happen and even themselves out in games where Whitecaps take points as a result.
Well, let's talk about the penalty just quickly as well. Your team is 3-0 down. You're a former player of the team that you're playing against, and you decide to do a Panenka Now, I know Freddie Montero is a confident guy, but even I was like, oh, geez, Freddie, why on earth would you try that? But it worked.
Was he trying to get bought out, hoping he would miss?
Of course, when he got subbed off as well, you're looking to see if he shakes MDS's hand, but he did, so that was good. But I mean, Montero scored. It's 3-1. The commentators here, Stephen, were going, oh, the Whitecaps can get back into this now. There's only 2 goals behind. They can really get back into it. Then 3 minutes later, they're down to 10 men. Bikel sent off. And now, this is something else we were talking about in the group chat. I feel Bikel was a bit hard done to in one regard, in that I don't think that was a straight red. I think it's definitely a booking, which would have been a second booking, so he would have been off anyway. So I've no question about him going off. But I don't think that was a straight red, because I don't really know how much he knew about it. There wasn't intent. It was just an unfortunate, he went in, it was a bit late. I mean, did you, what was the consensus in the Seattle press box? Was it was a straight red?
I'm sure it's probably the same for you guys in Vancouver. Consensus is hard to get when you're so socially distanced. You know, there's not a lot of talking that goes on and that kind of thing. I had a nightmare of a time with this one. When I initially saw it, I thought that the referee had showed the red card to Svensson. And it took actually several minutes to figure out that it was not a Seattle player who'd been sent off. From my angle, I could only see Svensson's right foot come up high, and I couldn't see either of Bikel's legs. And so I thought Svensson was sent off for a high boot and a firm challenge. And it took me a while to realize that it was actually Whitecaps who were down to 10 men. It was only when Seattle lined up for the free kick. And so I wish I had more for you. Having seen the replay from behind the goal, I mean, if you plant your studs on a guy's groin, then almost regardless, chances are you probably get a yellow card.
I know some folk pay for that. Your thoughts, guys, on the red card?
For me, it was I kind of felt like it was almost like a and I know you're going to make some joke out of this. It was a bang bang play, but for me, I felt like the intent definitely wasn't there. I felt Eden Hazard had more intent when he kicked that ball boy for Swansea than this one. So I think the intent definitely wasn't there. I agree that obviously even without intent, it probably is a yellow, and he's probably going to get sent off. But the first yellow, I don't recall it. Was there even a yellow there? I felt like he was it wasn't a pure yellow card either.
I thought that, yeah. I did think that booking that he got in the first half was a little bit harsh as well. But I mean, we've seen it with Bikel a couple of times. He's picked up a couple of bookings so far and a couple of early bookings. Cavallini's the same. He kind of plays with an aggressive streak, and MDS wants players that have that little bit of aggression to them. It's the whole fine lines thing of you don't want to go too much. And I thought Cavallini was lucky not to get a second yellow. He's missing from the next game anyway, but he flew into a tackle. I can't remember who it was on in the second half, and we were lucky not to have gone down to 9 men by that point.
Yeah, I agree with you, Michael, on the Bikel thing. I thought he should have been sent off, but I felt like a straight red, which I know different leagues have different things for. So in MLS, I know it's like in the Bundesliga, for example, it's a straight red is a 3-game suspension versus 2 yellows being a 1. So I don't think MLS has that based on previous experience, but
only if it's deemed later by Disco to be dangerous play, like Martial for Montreal against us at BC Place.
Right. Well, in the Bundesliga, it's automatic. Right, straight red is 3 games. You can appeal, I guess, but yeah. So, but no, I think it was unfortunate. He should have probably been a little bit more maybe not cautious, but careful at least. Because again, it looked like he was diving into a tackle really early before Svensson had fully kind of committed to what he was going to do or where he was going to go, and he couldn't pull out of it. And so it's unfortunate for him and unfortunate for Vancouver, but he should have been sent off for at least the very minimum a second yellow. I agree with Steve about Cavallini too. We were talking about this the whole time. His yellow card was, I think you used the term reckless, Michael, which is very apt. It was very, very a very foolish decision. to slide in like that.
He is reckless though. Like MDS was asked about this in the pre-game press conference, I think by JJ. It's like, does he have concerns that he's got this kind of reckless, hot-headed streak and that he's picking up all these cards? And MDS wasn't concerned. I'll be amazed if he's not sent off again before the end of the year, because he plays on the edge, and I like that. I like players that have that. But yeah, you can't be reckless with it. It's got to be controlled aggression.
The problem is, though, Michael, in Vancouver, we have the experience of a player like Kendall Waston, who came in with so aggressive and playing on that edge that you speak of and that you like, but he got this reputation in the league so that some of his things that were not that harsh, he was getting booked for, and that led to problems for him, with suspension and all that kind of stuff, and red cards as well. So I think Cava runs the risk of gaining a reputation with MLS referees and it causing him even more problems in the long term. But I agree with you. I mean, based on what he's done in the few games since Orlando, right? You would not be surprised to see him, find his way into the referee's notebook, with a sending off in the game, in the final 9 games or whatever it is.
Just to wrap the game up very quickly, and because we've got a lot more stuff to talk about, but Seattle had chances galore in the closing 20 minutes, and they squandered so many. I didn't even end up putting them in the report because there literally felt like there was 5, 6, maybe even more that should have got put away. They were certainly going for it. They were trying to increase it. So, I mean, at the end, coming away with a 3-1 loss was pretty good after that second half performance. The fact that they were in it up until half time, and then by full time, it's like you're lucky to get out of there with a 2-goal defeat. It's like baffling. Steve, I believe that, first of all, for anyone watching on the stream, there's a little hidden Easter egg there for long-time AFTN Soccer Show listeners. And
it's Thanksgiving coming up too.
Yes. Which sadly means there's no VMSL games next weekend. I'd make them play over Thanksgiving just so I've got some entertainment, but that's my personal thing. I'd make them play over Christmas as well. But partly they have to spend time with their families. Amateur footballers. But you've got a bit of an update, Steve, on the second goal, I believe.
Yeah, it actually just barely grazed Meredith's hands, one of his hands, and then went into Godoy. But I don't think he directed it towards Godoy's leg at all.
Interesting. So 3-1 defeat. We'll talk about some of the players and stuff. Oh, Zach, do you want to add something?
Well, I just want to ask. I mentioned you guys in our conversation. Stephen, last time you joined us from the bunker there, you talked about how teams who play against Seattle tend to not do well when they line up in a 4-4-2. Now I know MDS, Michael had talked about how the plan was to bunker and try and make it hard for Seattle to break them down. I just wonder your observations, Stephen. Do you feel like it was going with that formation was a bit of a not a good choice based on how teams have fared against Seattle in the past?
I think the results in the first half speak for themselves. Regardless of what I think, they were very, very effective at keeping Seattle from creating dangerous opportunities. They kept Seattle from getting in behind. And I think that you have to be happy with the defensive performance in the first half, outside of maybe a lapse here or there. Right at the end of the half, Morris gets that free header on the far post. Like, he should score that. But for the most part, like, Whitecaps were really, really solid, and they were better defensively than I thought they could be. And I thought that was more about what they were doing than about anything that Seattle wasn't doing. If you guys don't mind, before we move on, could I ask you a quick question?
Of course.
Or two, I hope just one. I was interested in it seemed to me like for both Dejome and Milinkovic, they really only had one moment in the game, and it was the same moment where Dejome gets fouled and they don't call it, and it should have been called. But before he ever gets fouled, he's got to pass the ball to Milinkovic there.
Yes, I should have mentioned that in the first half.
The Whitecaps broke with 5. Right? They got 5 guys up there. It's like, holy crap, where's the nosebleed, right? And he doesn't square it to Milinkovic, who's wide open. And correct me if I'm wrong, but was like Milinkovic even playing the rest of the game?
Do you know what? when you said there about, oh, I've got a question about Dahomey and Milinkovic, I was like, I thought in my head, oh, aye, Milinkovic was playing because, yeah, he was invisible. But yeah, that chance in the first half, that was terrible decision making from Dahomey. You've got 4 guys breaking. I put it back to seeing there was 5 Seattle defenders, but you've got options left and right of you. You don't keep hold of the ball for as long as you do. And that was frustrating. But yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of Milinkovic and what he's done here, but he was invisible tonight. They just could not get him into the game. And I think that falls back into being in the 4-4-2 because he's only really played 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3 when he's been in the wing. So I don't know what he was told about having some midfield or defensive responsibilities, but yeah, he was invisible.
I think that was part of it, Michael, and not just for Milinkovic, for Dahomey as well, because Dahomey I think did respectable defensively, like he was helping out quite a bit, helping Jake out quite a bit, and yeah, so I think that's what put him off. Because you're right, I think Milinkovic has been has had some performances that speak to his quality, but I think tonight again, like we talked about before, being maybe so focused on defense prohibit him from maybe attacking in the way that we know he can.
And I agree with Michael on the formation that probably affected him. Also, I think his best games have been recently as a number 10 when he was kind of like in the middle of the pitch. So I think and before this all happened, there were a number of moments, especially in Orlando, where he would disappear for long stretches in the game, and like over 40 minutes, where you wouldn't even hear about him, and then he just show up for a second, and then again he'd disappear again.
Can I ask another? Steven, do you have another question?
I wanted to ask about both wingers, and I got it in, so I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to ask, and you're probably the best person to ask because you were in the ground. One of the things that, I mean, generations change, right? And we're in this crazy pandemic, empty stadium world, which is, so in one sense that's an excuse or a reason or whatever. But one of the things that just felt awkward about watching the game tonight is it felt like even with all those excuses and all those reasons, that none of the white, like, it didn't feel like this was a big game for the players. Like, it just felt like there was something lacking from Vancouver. Like Seattle, I got a sense of it a little bit, and partly it's just, I mean, whenever you show Brian Smetchon on the screen, I feel that a little bit, but like that they're up for it, that they care, that they know the significance of this game. I know it's for you. I know for Seattle, it's not Portland and whatever. Then I totally understand that. But there's always been in the MLS era, and obviously before the MLS era, there's been something special when the teams take the field. And I've been there when there's 30,000 or 20, or 50,000 or whatever in Seattle, or 25,000 in Vancouver. And I've been there when there's 2,000 people watching, right? Like, or a few hundred watching the reserves play in Langley, or at a field or whatever. What was it like in the stadium? Was it like, did it feel like a Cascadia match to you?
It felt more like one of these closed door games between just two MLS sides than it did when Seattle played Portland a couple weeks ago. And it was here, there was an intensity to that. And even behind glass without any noise, you can kind of feel the intensity comes off of it. And I feel bad because I watch Vancouver every week. I root for the Whitecaps virtually every time I watch them play. I don't want to sound like an ass just coming off and saying this, but it's just, I don't think Seattle really look at them as a rival at the moment. And I think it's just because the results sort of speak for themselves. And the thing about rivalry games is that they're supposed to transcend record, right? Like, that's the thing. Portland can beat Seattle. Seattle can beat Portland anytime they play each other. And it just, I think you're right, Zach. It doesn't feel like Seattle Vancouver has that element to it right now, where that unpredictability comes in, where that passion comes in, where things can happen. And it's been that way for a while, but it wasn't like that when Vancouver came into the league. When Vancouver came into the league, it definitely felt like they could beat Seattle on any day they played them.
Yeah, because I think that's eight games now where we haven't beat Seattle.
Yeah, since 2017 or something. I remember, Steven, being at Starfire in a preseason game. I think it was before. It wasn't the Cascadia Summit. It might have been actually Vancouver was still in USL. No, they were anyways. And I was there, and there was a couple of like ECS dudes, but the teams didn't care. Like they were up for it, man. Like you could the challenges, the way the challenges were going, and the tension, like it was palpable, right? And there was no one there, and you just don't feel that anymore. And I know, again, Vancouver, a lot of the players don't know about that, but there are enough players in that squad who should know about that. I mean, there's enough flounders on in the Vancouver roster that they should know about that.
I think Michael was there too. We were at Starfire for residency games. And there were and that was intense, and to the point where we almost got our coach kicked off for yelling on the field and everything like that. So yeah, I agree with you. I don't think there's any intensity. I think it's a combination of no away supporters, but I think the biggest thing is what Steven says is I forget the Sounders. I don't think anybody considers the Whitecaps as competition at this point. I felt the same way in the TFC and Montreal games. I felt like they were either, the game where TFC was ahead and then they took the second half off. It was games like that. Like I don't think there is very much maybe not out in the open, but behind the scenes, there's not very much respect for the Whitecaps and what they put on the pitch.
Yeah, that's fair.
I actually wrote in my notes that it felt like a training game.
Which is something we've said a bunch now.
Yeah, it did not feel like an MLS game.
I think Montero, Rose, Meredith all had above average games. Maybe were three of the best Whitecaps on the pitch for a lot of the game. And that being said, I think we have to mention that it makes it harder for Seattle to take Vancouver seriously when three of their best players in the game are Seattle reserves from 5 or 6 years ago and a striker who hasn't played for them in 7 or 8 years. The league's changed a lot in that time. Most other clubs have gotten way better since then.
For me, like if we were giving a Whitecaps man of the match, and we don't like doing that anymore after defeats, it would have been Meredith. And the fact you're giving it to a goalkeeper that's let in 3 goals, at least one, maybe 2 he could have done better with, and he's your man of the match, it's like, that is not a good sign.
How many times did we do that for Kripo? Where Kripo let in like 3 or 4 goals and we thought he was the man of the match.
Yeah. Michael, can I ask a question from YouTube?
Yes.
It's just following up on this, and it's for Steven. Ryan Burns asks, interested what Steven thinks the Sounders and Timbers have done, that the Caps have not and do not. The difference between the clubs now.
Well, I wish I could make it more complicated than this, but Seattle and Portland have comprised the last 5 representatives for the Western Conference in MLS Cup.
But how did they get here? Is it just money, or is it better scouting? Is it when I watch, especially like if you look at TFC and you look at Seattle, contested 3 of the last 4 MLS Cups each. They mix their young guys with MLS veterans and money well spent. And they don't just look in the one area to bring in their designated players either. And I think that's the big difference. For too long, we've just looked in the one spot. MDS then cast the net far and wide and then brought us in players that, like Jasser Kamiri from Tunisia, maybe he'll turn out to be great. He's been called up for Tunisia. He's been an absolute disaster for us. I just think their scouting and everything is way better at Seattle, Portland, Toronto.
I think for me, and we've discussed it many times before, is they use the tools that are available to them perfectly, near perfectly, or at least use them. Forget even using them perfectly. They use the tools that are available to them. So the 3 DPs that they bring in are true DP players that are worth the money that they pay for, and then that elevates the rest of the roster. And whereas younger players come on the pitch and they feel more confident because they have such talent around them.
Yeah, I think all those things are true. And I also think one of the things that I think people in Vancouver have come to more fully realize in the last year or two is in Seattle and Portland, you have this overwhelming sense that ownership and upper management care about how they actually perform on the field. You might not like Merritt Paulson, right? But you know the dude cares. You know what I mean? Or you might not like his approach or his social media persona or whatever, or his interactions, but you know the dude cares. You might not like Gavin Wilkinson, but you know he cares about the Portland Timbers and how they're perceived, how they go about things, all that kind of stuff. You know that they care. And same thing in Seattle with Anauer and I forget all the other names of guys in the middle management, but like that they care, right? Whereas in Vancouver, the fact that there's limited exposure to ownership, and it's only usually in crisis, and the executives public appearances are very, again, usually crisis based, but there's never been a sense that they actually care. It seems like they only care about running a business, not like what the football club actually is. But
Zach,
for me, that's a broken record.
Zach, we do get tweets from our owners that tell us to hang tough. So at least we have that.
Yeah, that's our 2% owner. Yeah.
So, I mean, Stephen, going back to Ryan's question then, like when you watch the Whitecaps, what do you feel is lacking compared to, say, the Sounders?
Okay, so I have two parts to this, because I don't think this is the Whitecaps' fault, okay, and I'll get to this, but I think what Whitecaps don't do very well, it seems like year over year, Vancouver never keep their best pieces. There's never any building. The best pieces always go away. They always get sold. That being said, I think we all know and we all recognize that Whitecaps don't enjoy the same ability to attract players and to retain players the way that Seattle and Portland do, just on account of the turf at the stadium, on account of the travel schedule, on account of being in Canada instead of the United States, where most of the clubs are. We know these are challenges that Whitecaps have to overcome that make it more difficult for them to sign players that Seattle and Portland just kind of take for granted. I don't like that. That's the thing. I feel bad about bringing it up because I don't know how to overcome that problem. I don't think it's just geography. I don't think it's just as simple as putting in a grass field or chartering flights. I think those things could help. But maybe it does come back to money. Maybe it does come back to greater investment would be the most immediate solution to the issue. But if you just look at it, Portland started to get decent 2012, 2013. They found pieces that worked, and then they started to build on it, and they started to add players around it. And Seattle has always relentlessly kept their best players. And Vancouver, sometimes it's hard for us to identify who are the guys who we should be hanging on to here, who are the guys to build around. And B, sometimes ownership is more interested in shipping them out and getting the money for them than they are in keeping them. And I think we've all seen that ownership isn't so effective at turning around and spending that money. Sadly
true. We'll talk a little bit more about some additions and stuff like that in the next part. I just want to end this part. Something else from the YouTube chat from our good friend Naveed Masinshi. He says, I'm wondering what MDS told the team at halftime. Maybe something like, time to show your true colours. And that was what we saw in the second half. It was a strange, and I keep referring to the team as being like Jekyll and Hyde. We saw it in the match this time because I still don't really know. I guess it's more what Schmetzer said to Seattle at halftime that lit a fire under them. We'll talk about what MDS said after the match in the next part. And we'll be back with that for those of you listening on the podcast after this. So what we'll be doing for folk on the podcast is we'll play a little bit of audio from Brian Schmetzer and we'll play a little bit from MDS. But I'll talk a little bit about what MDS said from the game. I kind of jotted some stuff down. Now, MDS, after the match, was, as I alluded to earlier, obviously not a happy bunny, and you would not expect him to be. He said he felt that this was going to be a game of patience, that by half-time, he thought the team could get something from the game. But after that first goal went in, he said the team found it hard to react. And it goes back to the fact that once they go down a goal, They've only won one of those games that they've fallen behind, and that's what he needs to kind of find the better of. The very first question was that did he feel that he can't get consistency from his team? And he basically was like, I have no respect for people that say it's about consistency, because in this current situation, you can't have consistency. It's just not possible, because they're playing 5 games in 16 days. They've got all these injuries. They've got a midfield now that you're missing Bikel through suspension. Owusu seems injured. You've got Cavallini now out with suspension, obviously not a midfielder. You've got Tybert that's got some kind of long-term injury that we don't know about. So our midfield's now down to bare bones. So Baldy's definitely going to be getting a start, I would imagine, with Andy Rose on Wednesday. So, I mean, it is tough to get consistency, but he doesn't want to use any of that as an excuse. He did, interestingly, say that he wants to focus on Wednesday even more after this loss. And that's something I'm going to come to in a sec. And the last thing I want to just say that he was asked, is he worried about things just now? And I thought this was a very telling one. To him, the word worry means different connotations in football sense. And he didn't explain, but he has explained before. If someone says, are you worried about something? It's like, I'm worried about my family. I've got a sick relative, or we can't pay the bills. To him, that's real worry. This is just football. But he said he's not worried about anything because he has to do the best with what he has right now. Now, we've heard that before. And sadly, a lot of what we've heard the last couple of weeks is things that we've heard before. Like Axel saying, oh, we've been close to getting signings, or we're close to getting some signings over the line, and we're not getting them done. We were told, oh, we can't get signings in because of the quarantine. And then Evan Bush reveals in his press conference, he's got a 3-day quarantine because they sent a charter to New York to fly him, one player, to fly him to Portland. And because of that, if he passes 2 tests, he only has to quarantine for 3 days. So you can get players from within MLS and within the States that only have to go into a 3-day quarantine. That's for later in this part. But I mean, what did you make of what MDS said there? He seems resigned to the fact that this is just going to be a struggle. I asked him on Friday, is it a case of targeting the games that you feel you can get the points from? What do you even class those games as anymore? Because you'd have thought San Jose, they've been humped in a couple of games. They've now beat LAFC, and they beat, I think it was LA Galaxy tonight. And now they're climbing the table. And LA Galaxy is the team that's below the Whitecaps. I still don't fancy us going to LA and getting the job done against the Galaxy, though, either. So, I mean, is this season just a foregone conclusion? Is it over?
I would, I would say it was over. That's where I would classify it as. But yeah, if MDS, I think a lot of coaches do that in anyways, whether they want to admit it or not, that they kind of pinpoint where they, especially when it's a condensed schedule like this, they want to pinpoint where they can get points and where they might have to bunker down and try maybe go for the draw. I don't think anybody's saying, oh, we're going to lose this game, but I think it's either you win it, you're going to go for the win, or you're going to try to get the draw and play for the draw, which sometimes ends up being a losing strategy.
I mean, Stephen, watching it from afar, do you think, and like looking at the table just now, let me just get the standings up, because we're second bottom. We are still just 3 points off a playoff place. And considering how badly they've been playing in some of these games and not taking chances in the games that they have been playing decent enough in, it's still doable. Would you put money on the Whitecaps making the playoffs right now?
Would I put money on the Whitecaps making the playoffs right now? I'm not sure how to answer that politely. I think I'll just say no. No, I would not. I think that the season's done. I think that when you trade Yordi Reyna to DC United for no compensation this year whatsoever, we're just not even worried about what's happening with the squad this year. I think that shows where your mind is at. You mentioned bottom of the standings. I think it's It's far enough gone that it just seems hard to do at this point. Salt Lake's 18 from 14. Whitecaps are 15 from 15. There are a lot of people in between. There's not a ton of time left in this season. And just while we're on the standings here, Nashville's got 14 from 17. Okay. And somebody's going to have to remind me who it was. But to me, the most resonant quote I've ever heard out of the Whitecaps front office was the man who said, "I believe we can be the most efficiently run club in MLS." Right? It's like, great. Okay. Apparently that doesn't have anything to do with results on the field, because Nashville started 5 USL players tonight. They started 5 guys who played in USL last year, and they drew 0-0 at New England. So tell me, are you the most efficiently run club in MLS when Nashville comes in, starts half a USL squad? They've got 2 more points than you do in a game fewer played?
I mean, it depends what you class as efficiency, for one thing. We won't go into that too much because that is something that we've talked about before with the front office. But I didn't actually know until I looked at the standings just now. Nashville's in the playoff places in the East as a Western team. But anyway, that aside, they were terrible. What on earth happened to Nashville that put them in the playoff places? I'm stunned by that.
They had the summer off.
Oh, that's true. They've been topping up their tan. Maybe we'll have a look at just MLS in general in a little bit, because there was a fun thing happened in the DC game tonight that I don't know if you guys have seen, but we'll come to that. Now, MDS. A couple of comments here from the chat. Prog Tim says, MDS did complain about what they have to go through when answering Gemma's question tonight about consistency. But he says, aren't the Impact and TFC going through exactly the same thing? Yes, they are. Ryan Burns said, yeah, that's true.
TFC gets to play at Wrench. That's nothing like playing Portland at Portland in a home game.
No, but they will have to play New York in New York at some point. In fact, did they not just do that and got beat? I think.
Did they? I'm sorry. Okay. I just saw Toronto and Connecticut tonight, and that's infinitely better than Portland.
Yeah. Ryan Burns says, MDS, for a coach that every opportunity says he doesn't want to make excuses, since the Men in Black, I always think when I see MIB, I think Men in Black. Since the MLS's back tournament, he's quick to make excuses. He says all MLS teams are dealing with unusual circumstances. They are. There are some weird things, though. So, for example, today, the Whitecaps had to fly from Portland to Seattle at 10 a.m. because that's the latest they can fly for an away game. So they got into Seattle at 10:45 for a game that kicked off at 7, and then just had to kick about their hotel, I'm assuming having naps and stuff. So, I mean, that's not ideal preparation. MDS, I was asked on Friday about it, and he said, look, we know other teams are going through this. We have to somehow find a way to deal with this traveling, because he says traveling on the day of playing a game is not good. Do they go the day before and risk exposure to COVID? They don't want to do that. I'm sure some players might be nervous about that. But the other option is you do fly in game days. I mean, you know what it's like flying. Even if you're on a pretty empty charter flight or whatever, there's not a lot of leg room. This is stretching out. There's the air quality. It kind of saps you. It dehydrates you. I mean, genuinely, it isn't ideal. But a lot of teams are going through it. We do obviously have it tough because we've got no games at home at all. And every team has got 5 games coming up now in the space of 16 days. One thing which was raised, Naveed Mastinchi again. This was a discussion that we were having on Twitter, and he's actually updated it tonight, which I'll tweet out. But he put together, and KJ talked about this on the TSN broadcast tonight, MDS's record after the first 50 games. And I don't know if you actually know this, Stephen. So his first 50 games in charge across all competitions, MDS has won 13, drawn 11, 26 defeats. They've scored 1 goal in 34 of those 50 games, or 1 goal or less, 34 of the 50 games. He's taken 50 points from 50 games with a 26% win record. Does that shock you?
No, because I don't think the level of investment has drastically increased over what Carl Robinson had.
Now, interesting you mentioned Carl Robinson, because Naveed also put together Robbo's record over the first 50 games. And my caveat here is I'd like to see Robbo's record over the last 50, because I think that's kind of a comparison, because obviously MDS took over Robbo's squad to an extent. But MDS has spent a lot more in his first 50 games than Robbo would have spent in his last 50, if that makes sense. But I didn't have time to put that together. So I know Naveed's watching this. So I would be really interested in seeing Robbo's record over the last 50. But Robbo's record in his first 50 was 18 wins compared to MDS's 13, 17 draws to MDS's 11, and he only lost 15 to MDS's 26 for a 36% win record and 71 points claimed. So a
Now-
big difference.
Now, the one thing is about Robbo, what Robbo took over and what MDS took over was that Robbo took over a team that was kind of ascending. There was a player that he lost, obviously Camilo. So that was one player, whereas MDS essentially lost the majority of the team that he was supposed to take over.
Yeah, that's
So he
why
was
I'd
almost-
also like to see Robbo's last 50 as well, because I think that's
if you
better
want to
comparison.
compare anything with MDS, you want to compare his for 50 games with the first 50 games of the 2011 Whitecaps, because that would be like an expansion team, which MDS kind of took over when he started coaching.
Oh yeah, we need better numbers, but I think someone like Glass City has talked about this a little bit on Twitter, and I think we all have a bias in one way, shape, or form. In Glass City, sorry, he or she, I think said that kind of when Robinson took over, when Carl Robinson took over, they were still in the upper third of spending, but by the end of his time, it wasn't. So when he was doing his best, it was when they were spending more, not surprisingly. And as things declined, that was in the end of his time, which again goes into this bigger story of it seems like the approach from the ownership, the very much absent ownership, is that they are decreasing their investment into the squad itself.
I'd like to see. I wish I could be on a fly on the wall to see what drastically changed this ownership. What happened? Was it the fact that Atlanta came in at the time and scared the hell out of them about how much they were spending and how much everybody else was spending to keep up, or something like that? And they go, "We can't handle this. We're just going to take it the other way and try to do something different."
Yeah, but here's a couple of things. One, yes, Atlanta is spending a lot of their own money, but I don't think we've talked about this probably enough on the show. When an expansion team comes in, they are allocated a significant amount of extra allocation for 3 years. I know Vancouver, their first year was 1 million in allocation. After that, I don't know. And I only know that because Jeff Anderson told me himself. But yeah, so Atlanta, I think you can partially see part of their decrease in performance is connected to having less and less allocation, and they were smart, and they kind of struck well they had the advantage, and got a title and all that kind of stuff. Now obviously there are many other factors involved in that, but I think that is one that is kind of not always maybe not always recognized with the expansion of the new teams to the league.
I mean, Stephen, if you think of the teams that have come in and they are spending money, the more teams that get added, then the Whitecaps budget, if it stays the same, they're going to fall. And they have been amongst the lowest spenders. I know the salaries for this year haven't come out yet, but I do feel you look at the last year, they brought in a $6 million designated player. They are paying, I imagine, some pretty hefty salaries. Like they paid to bring Godoy in. I don't know what kind of ticket he's on yet, because we're waiting to see all this kind of stuff. But I mean, they have been paying transfer fees. They are paying some wages to guys as well. That's going to be interesting to see what they are. I don't think this year under Mark, you can say that they haven't spent money. They've maybe not gone crazy and brought in lots of DPs. like some of the other teams have, they've also made money, of course, by selling in Bomb, but they had paid money to bring in Bomb in the first place. They're sitting on a whack of Gam and Tam and all the Garber bucks from like in Bomb going on, and Fonzie and clauses that Fonzie's going to have hit. Is it a case, do you feel, that next year they spend money, they can get back in the playoffs? If they do you think they would have to be another top 8 spending team to really turn this team around to an extent that they don't just make the playoffs, but they're actually competitive in the playoffs?
Simply put, yes. I think they'd have to spend in the top 8 to do that next year.
Because the thing for me,
I'm sorry if I can expand. I would say that spending this year doesn't undo the dumpster fire of decisions that came before that. And that, I think Zach mentioned, MDS inherited essentially an expansion team, right? And like, it didn't need to be that way. Look at where this team was on October 3rd, or what is it? October 3rd, 2017, right? Couple weeks before the end of that regular season. We're still in it with a legitimate chance to win the West, right? The fact that things have gone like this since then, we are truly in the very darkest timeline. And I admit it occurred to me tonight, is it time for a gimmick? If ownership's not going to do what you're suggesting and spend in the top 8 next year to try and get in the playoffs, maybe it's time to go the San Jose Earthquakes direction. Maybe it's time to go the Stoke City direction and figure out what's our gimmick. Earthquakes play man-to-man. Maybe you find a guy with a long throw and just bunker like crazy. I don't know. But if we're not going to spend, either we have to spend consistently year over year, keep the best pieces and keep on getting better, or you might as well try and find a gimmick and beat people with a cheese strategy.
That's an interesting. I've never really thought of it that way, because I think everyone just thinks about having a balanced team. I mean, a nice, unusual gimmick for the Whitecaps would be to get a midfielder. I mean, we've never thought of having a number 10. That would be a nice gimmick. But like, to be serious and not just to be kind of facetious about stuff, Robbo's success and the years that he had, and I know he's much maligned now, but I think folk actually do forget the success that Robbo had with this team. And they weren't spending big bucks, but so much of it was built around a solid defense. And you look at his last year and MDS's 2 years, that defense has been like all over the place, shipping goals left, right, and center. And we've got one of the best goalkeepers in MLS. But you could have, with 5 goalkeepers in the books, I think we'd have to play all 5 sometimes to keep some of the goals out that we've been letting in.
Well, and I mean, maybe we don't want to break it down this much, and you look at why the defense was so poor. Like, I think sometimes we forget that how different players work together and gel together and perform well together. And I think the departures of people like Tim Parker and even David Osted, whether you thought they were at the peak or they were in the decline or they were worth what they were asking or what they got, or they were underpaid in previous year or whatever, the chemistry and the connectedness that they had with those two plus Kendall, Beta and Jordan obviously earlier, like you can't replace that easily, and they discovered that very, very, very quickly.
And they should have had if they were gonna see. I also the preparedness of letting these guys go was not in effect, because they didn't have good replacement for them. They kind of got rid of them and tried to band-aid over the issue, the hole that they left open. And I think that was the biggest issue too. And also, I think we talked it on a previous podcast where the reputation of the club went down when they were started getting rid of these players, the Tim Parker, David Osted, the whole Media Day massacre, all the players that left there like Kai Kamara and everything like that. And them trying to, through back channels, put the blame on these players, and then these players actually spreading the word of what actually happened, also put a bad light on the Whitecaps organization.
Yeah, I mean, players talk and reputations like carry forward. A lot of people do respect Mark DeSantis. I've got a lot of respect for Mark because I've known him for so long. I've seen what his teams do. And I mean, I'd kind of asked him not so much about consistency on Friday, but I kind of said to him, normally in a season running, a manager's going to be like, okay, I'm going to be playing these 11 players and I'm going to play them to see out the last 5, 6 games, whatever. But you know that that can't happen because of everything that's going with it, because players are going to need to rest. You'd run them into the ground. But at the same time, and I've spoken to him about this before, and he mentioned it on Friday, you look at all his most successful teams, and he says, I could name you all the players that would be regular starters for me, and especially on the defensive side. Now, our defense has been rotating constantly this year. It's like we used to joke years ago, Stephen. It was like right back roulette because it was a different right back we had every week at the start of our MLS era. This whole defense, it's like you don't know really, apart from the goalkeeper, who was going to be in the center of defense. Was Jake going to be starting at right back? Was it going to be Bikel? Was it going to be Godoy? Was Adnan going to be left back? Was it going to be Gutierrez? Were they going to go 3 at the back? And you've just not got that kind of defensive consistency. And we've brought in a new goalkeeper now. And I mentioned this last year, and I don't want to really hark back to it, but I think when you've got a guy like Mats Crepeau, who sets the MLS save record for 16 saves in a game, whilst letting in 3 goals and a lot of other shots that weren't on target, that is great on a personal thing, but that should not be held up as an achievement because it just shows you how bad that defense was. And what they did not do in the off-season was act enough to plug that defense. And we've got a designated player that's a left back that likes to play left back, but is better as a left midfielder, but says he doesn't really like playing left midfield because he likes to be a left back. But then he goes forward and then he doesn't come back. So you've got that on one side, and then you've got Jake Nowinski, who's a solid MLS player. But if you've got a defense that's struggling, I think you need better than that. And that's something I think the Sounders have always done well, going back to Steve's point. Whenever someone's going to move on, or whenever they've got a gap or a hole, they seem to already have someone lined up to fill it. You've got Smith coming back. You've got Torres coming back, as an example.
You know, it's easier said than done, but it's not rocket science in MLS. You find 4 defenders who are going to be above average or really, really good, and then you have them play together a lot before playoffs. It's just like pretty much that easy, right? Like Seattle do that. They keep their best defenders year after year. Like you say, they think about it ahead of time when guys are going to retire, when guys are going to go away. Who do you bring in next? Just to touch on the prior point, frankly, Parker and Osted, neither Seattle nor Portland would have ever let them go to somebody else in the league. It just literally never would have happened. And I don't think that anybody can show me an example of a player like that from either of those clubs staying in the league somewhere where they could hurt their club, their old club.
There's an interesting comment from Naveed in the chat that says, did MDS have to blow everything up?
I don't think he had a choice. I think it was already blown up before he got here.
Yeah,
wasn't it at the time?
Well, Kendall and Kai wanted to go.
Yeah, and even if he tried to, I don't think they would have stayed.
Well,
I think Kai was already gone.
Kai was open to staying. Kai was very much open to staying. Kai would have stayed. They just didn't want to pay him what he felt he was worth. I mean,
so I mean, you can't put that on MDS.
No, but the number of players exiting when Robbo exited, I mean, there's different layers of this that we could talk about, but is directly related to at least partially directly related to the players' perception of how they felt the club treated their coaches. Right now, there's a significant die there. So I know, Michael, you've talked about how you didn't like the approach to this. But that's why Kendall Waston said, while he was still here and still under contract, that he wanted to go because of how he felt his coach was treated. And that's what it was. And so the thing you talked about earlier about in terms of they have a reputation, the club has a reputation. Yeah, they do. And it's not a good one. People who talk to players, who talk to people who've been here before, people who know how they function, the reputation is not good. And that's one of the things that, and for those who love football in Vancouver, that might be the biggest damage that they've done. The people running the club, the owners and the executives, is they have given Vancouver this negative reputation, not only in MLS, not only in North America, but now it's gone around the world with things that, around with the Alphonso Davies transfer and whatnot. So like, yeah.
And it's not even at the first team level. There's been bad reputation, and I'm not talking about the illegal stuff that happened. I'm talking about just everyday kind of stuff that happens in the academy. So there are stuff that there's some people are not happy with either, and it's spread around a little bit too.
I just want to mention by comparison, Seattle's obsessed with their reputation. Every aspect of it. What players who are coming in think of them, what players who have settled here think of them, what players who have left think of them. They're obsessed with it. They don't have a hard time getting players to go there.
Yeah. And Vancouver is obsessed, but
they don't know how to handle it. They think they're doing a great job.
The problem is
whatever it is, the culture's all wrong. It's whatever it is, come out all wrong.
A couple of things. One, which multiple people have said in the past, they think they know they have all the answers. They're not really willing to take suggestions unless it comes in certain ways or whatever. But the other problem is they only care about the perception, and they only care that it's bad. So one of the problems that I think people have is they want to know how you deal with things when they don't go well. They want to know how you deal with difficult situations, and they know that in Vancouver, the typical way that those are dealt with is it shouldn't be public. No one should know about, because failure or mistakes or whatever is perceived as only negative. There is this extreme fear of failure within the entire organization because they fear that it'll cost them money. And so that's one of the biggest parts of the culture that I personally have experienced, and I've heard from others as well. And when you have that level of fear of failure, it stifles creativity. It stifles excellence. It doesn't make it a place where people want to be, where people want to invest more of their lives. And yeah, I mean, that's just one of the massive problem. But yeah, they care about the perception, and it has to be perfect. So much so that they'll do anything to scrub, erase anything that could be perceived as negative, because they're not willing to, hold their hand up very often. Hold their hand up and say, we got this wrong, and we apologize, and we need to fix this. And that's why Mark Panis was such a huge breath of fresh air to people, because he was willing to say, yeah, we got that wrong, and I'm sorry, and we are going to work at being better. Whereas before it was just like, yeah, we got that wrong. Don't tell anyone. Let's hit the reset button, and we're all good. And you can't function that way. And that's the reason why they've seen such a lapse, such a lowering of investment and engagement from those who have been so passionate over the MLS era and before that.
And it seems like that the only time that they're interested in repairing their reputation is when it's season ticket renewal time, and that's when they'll come out with certain projects or announcements or something like that that they're trying to get people excited again.
I don't know if I've told this anecdote before on the show, but I want to tell it for Steven because he'll have it. This is how much that things like the fear of failure and money are so significant and so important to them. It was a Voyageurs Cup match, Wednesday night Voyageurs Cup match. Either final or semifinal. It was against, I think, Toronto. And we were doing for the first time, we were doing a 500 flag display across the supporter end at BC Place. And so we're in the ground, a handful or two of supporters were in the ground ahead of time, setting up the flags, putting them on poles, spreading them out the distance they needed to be to make it look, respectable. So 500 BC flags on 500 poles.
Cool.
4 different people came up to us while we were doing this. 4 different people at different levels within the organization. One was in communications. One was the equipment manager. One was, I think, one of the players when they were coming in, and one was not a high level executive, but someone connected to the executive. And without fail, each of them asked the exact same thing as their first question to us. Can you guess what that is?
Who did this? How can we do this again?
No, all of them. The very first words of all of their mouth was, "How much did this cost you guys?"
Oh, yeah, sure.
It was unbelievable. All they because of the culture, because of the way they work, because of the way they operate. All they were just like, wow, this must have cost you guys a lot of money. Like, how much did it cost you? How much are you investing into this? Because that's the way their minds work. That's the
how much GAM did you spend on this?
Yeah, it was mind-boggling. I couldn't believe it that it was the same thing from these different people throughout the organization. But that's just one example of who they are and the culture they've created and how they function. And I'm not saying that money isn't important, because I know people like to say, oh, this is a business. Well, I get that. You need to be run as a functioning and a competent business. But it also is more than a business. It's a football club. It's a community thing that needs to strive to be more than a business. And that's one of the things, as much as it pains me to say it, that's one of the things that Seattle has done well. That's one of the things that Portland has done well, that Vancouver has failed at, and is why, when Bobby Lenarduzzi or Paul Barber back in the day said, oh, it's just going to be like Seattle here or even better. They didn't get that it was more than a money thing.
Yeah, there are things that are more damaging than losing, things that are more damaging than failure, and that fear, that culture, that's one of them, man. I mean, I don't know how you get away from it, and I feel bad because Whitecaps have factors that affect them that Seattle and Portland don't have, and it's just I don't know how you overcome it, but I know it takes extra.
Sorry, I was just messaging someone about pussies. Genuinely.
I'm not surprised to hear that.
There's someone that's watching the show mentioned they've been talking about a cat. Anyway, you know who you are. I think that pretty much wraps up the Whitecaps talk for the show. 3 parts, hour and a half. That's more than enough for anyone. We're going to turn our attentions, though, to the rest of MLS in the next part. And for those of you listening on the podcast, we will be back with that after this. And for those of you watching the stream, we're back with it right now. So, I mean, we've talked about the Whitecaps in the first 3 parts there. One thing which we didn't sort of delve into Whitecaps-wise, so we're not fully finished talking with them, is they did make a trade this week in that they brought in Evan Bush into the Whitecaps, flying from Montreal, but from New Jersey into Portland. As I talked about in the last part, 3-day quarantine allowed him to come in with 2 negative COVID tests, which he then got, thus blowing up the whole premise of the Whitecaps can't get trades done in MLS because it's going to take way too long. All these other teams seem to be managing to get trades as well. And then you've got Seattle. It's brought in Smith and Torres, as I mentioned as well. So things do seem to be able to get done by other teams. And the more that we're not doing anything, it's just very, very telling. And Axel Schuster was again talking about how close he is to getting deals done and maybe over the line. It's too little too late now, I feel. There's a game coming up against San Jose on Wednesday that I think if they lose that, that's pretty much the season over, barring a tremendous late run. If you look at the standings in the West, Seattle out on top, Portland, SKC, Minnesota, Dallas, Colorado, LAFC, RSL. That's your top 8 that's in the playoff spots. Now, you've got Colorado on 19 points, so the Whitecaps are just 4 off them, and they're in 6th. LAFC and RSL have got 18 points. Then you've got San Jose on 17, Houston on 16, Vancouver on 15, Galaxy on 15. It is still achievable if they can somehow string results together and get something going. Well, I mean, let's just be honest. We kind of touched on it before. Do you see them making the playoffs? I guess, does anyone think we are going to make the playoffs? Put your hand up. Okay. So out of that then, if we're looking at who's probably definitely in, Seattle, Portland, I'd say SKC, probably Minnesota. So you've maybe got the top 4 are in. Out of the teams that's not in it just now, which is San Jose, Houston, ourselves, and the Galaxy, do any of you feel that any of those 4 teams are going to put it together enough to make it in to the postseason?
Frankly, I don't really feel it's about any of those 4. I think it's about Colorado and if they can stay healthy. And by that, I mean coronavirus. I'm pretty concerned that they're not going to be able to play all of their games. And, it's not just as simple as rescheduling them. They don't have any space on the schedule. They have to start playoffs when they start them. I think Colorado's heading towards some forfeits.
I hope it doesn't come to that, because that to me is completely unacceptable. You've made a season, you've made these teams play, you know the risks. You can't get them to forfeit unless they've done something stupid to bring the virus to them. You can't forfeit, but you then have the issue. I know, how do you fit these games in?
But you can't, and you also, you can't. It's not just as simple as saying, well, let's take Colorado's points per game average and add a couple on, right? It's, well, Portland plays Colorado. Shouldn't that be if they're playing playing Colorado at home, aren't they going to beat them most likely? Isn't that 3 points for Portland, right? So, I mean, it's complicated. And I fear that forfeit option is what comes into play. And, if Rapids have to forfeit 3 or 4 times before the end of the season, yes, I definitely think they're getting jumped in the playoffs, in the standings, excuse me.
That's interesting. If you look at some of the results, I mean, it's been so weird. KC have been up and down, but I think San Jose in particular, I'm just getting their results up here just now. They got a couple of shellackings, and I can't 100% off the top of my head remember who they were from. So let me have a quick look at this. Where are we? Live shows. Okay, yeah. So they lost 5-1 to LAFC. Then they drew 1-1 with Colorado. Then they got a 7-1 thumping to Seattle. How could I have forgotten that? And then they've turned it around with a 0-0 draw, a 1-0 draw. Then they lost 6-1 to Portland. Then they lost 5-0 to Colorado. Then they've won 2-1, and then they've won another one 2-1. That is a stunning set of results. And you've seen about LAFC as well. On the road, they've had some big losses, including to Portland. They lost 3-0 to Seattle. I mean, do you just put it down to just a weird travel situation, Stephen, or is there more to it?
Earthquakes play that weird system, right, where they're man marking all the time. And I guess part of me wonders, does it take people a while to figure that out? And like the second time you play them, it's a lot easier to break them down because you've seen it before. The travel's a great point, right? Like Sounders drew Earthquakes 0-0 in Orlando in their first game at MLS is back, and then beat them 7-1 in Seattle, right? It's hard to say. There are a lot of competing things. They're playing a stupid system, but they've got a really smart coach. They've got a stupid front office, but they're making good additions to the roster. It's weird calculus there, Michael. I don't know that I understand it all.
I mean, Zach, Steve, what are you putting down this weird results this season to? I mean, is it just fatigue? Is it the travel situations, not being at home stadium, not having the fans there, losing home field advantage, all of the above?
Yeah, I think those are all factors. I think the losing Eriksson in the middle of this season, I think, has played a role. I think he's one of those people who, it's not just his contributions on the pitch, the tangible things that you can see in XG stats or whatever. I think it's the intangible, like, leadership and connectiveness that he brings to the team. Like, I don't know, when I watch him play, like, I get the sense that, like, the way I see him communicating with his teammates, that he's a passionate person who cares and who, like, you want to be on your team, or you want to play with. So I think that's had some role in it. But I mean, yeah, some of those games, like when you watch those highlights and you see them just getting hammered, it's weird to then see them these last couple of games or whatever win games 2-1. But I think that for those reasons, because it's so weird, they're not so weird, sorry, they're unique, their approach is so unique. I think that they could still somehow do it, and by do it I mean be one of the top 8 teams and qualify for the playoffs.
Because I mean, for me, that's the thing with the Whitecaps. It's like, from MDS's point of view, he wants to get into the playoffs, and I think he would see that as a big victory with everything that they've gone through. And in all honesty, it would be, because this is not easy for the players what they're going through. I know other teams are going through it, but the only teams that's really going through it the way that the Whitecaps are Toronto and Montreal. And Montreal's been quite up and down as well, and even Toronto's had the odd late lapse or whatever. But it then comes down to, is there any point in making the playoffs? Because every game that we've seen them play against a top team, they're not even at the races. They're not competing. It's maybe a morale boosting thing, Stephen. But if they get there, I know anything can happen in a one-off cup game. You just don't fancy them to do anything once they get there.
After having gone so far backward since 2017, I think that even just making the playoffs would be a big step for this franchise. I think that with the number of clubs who have come in who are spending big, and with the stratification we've seen between top and bottom, it's going to get harder for people to come into the playoffs and do well without having been there before. And that almost necessitates a year of just, dud play once you're in there, just to get your feet under you a little bit. So I'd do almost anything to see the Whitecaps in a playoff game, even if they get beaten 5-0. But it's not going to happen, right? I look forward to when we have a Whitecaps playoff game where they're a huge underdog, because that would be a step ahead of where we are.
I mean, Steve, here's a question from the chat that I'll put to you, from Randy D. Not really so much a question as a statement. The owners have zero interest to challenge for a championship. These are the same people who are proud of one single sad playoff victory. They want an adequate product, bland and safe. The amount that we, like that 5-0 win over San Jose, that's like held up as this big pinnacle thing. But it was one playoff game. And then in the matches that really mattered, we did fuck all.
Yeah, and I think it's more, I'm not going to say that they don't care about winning a title, because they probably do, but I think they want to do it in spending the least amount of money. That's what I feel like. Like they just want to efficient. Yeah, I guess they want to be more efficient.
Title going.
Yeah, so I think I think that's what they're looking at, and when you to the point, I think where Zach said that they are afraid to make mistakes and they're afraid to take chances. It feels like that they're because at the beginning of their run in MLS, they were spending money on typical, not high profile players like Kenny Miller, and Barry Robson was a player that they spent money on. So they were showing that point of view, but something happened there where that they just stopped at that point, at some point, and they just tried to go as cheap as possible. And they tried to, I don't know if the greed of the Alphonso Davies sale turned him into wanting to buy younger players so they could sell them off for profit or whatever like that. I just can't put a finger on what caused them to turn and change their ways, because they were doing it at the beginning of the Robbo period too, where they were doing stuff where they're spending money, and then halfway through they said, no, we're not doing that anymore.
Well, that's because they were turning their focus on to developing the homegrown so they could then sell them.
I haven't verified this, and this might take us down on a massive tangent, but I think someone was researching and posted in the Whitecaps Facebook fan page or whatever, and said that Vancouver and Seattle in the MLS era have had the same number of designated players, something like 15 players. But obviously, when you look at the vast gulf in quality in them, that's where the proof is in the pudding, right?
Are you trying to say that Joaquin Ardiez is not on the same level as Nicolas Ladero.
Well, you could say that maybe, but nobody would argue that Ladero can hold a candle to Mustafa Jarju.
True. I mean, he's infamous. Who's going to be talking about Ladero in a couple of years' time? Actually, probably most folk, but...
Well, didn't he score against the Manchester City? Jarju? Was
No,
he the one?
no,
he
no,
somebody
played.
else?
He played. It was Camilo who scored.
Yeah, but that was the most effort he showed in the game, though.
No, he
against
scored in
Manchester City.
as if you check the
Reserve.
AFTN Canada YouTube channel, he scored in a reserve game in Portland, a stunning free kick. I captured it on video. Otherwise, no one would believe me.
I have seen that video.
It's one of our most watched videos because everyone's like, no, he doesn't score goals.
Michael, you need to tweet that out tomorrow.
And I think Jarju was the one that was rumored to be like, as soon as he got off the plane, that he goes like, I don't want to be here.
Yes.
I want to go back.
That's not rumor. That's
true.
Straight out of his peer's mouth. Yeah. You know who told me that? Ridge told me that.
Yeah. Because he just hung around with him the whole time, didn't he?
Yeah.
So
at the end of that season, they're having a team ending meal together or whatever. And Mustafa didn't want to go. He just hung out with Ridge over at the house, the apartment building.
So he missed that as well. Anyway, now we don't know when we're going to get Stephen back on the show again. And we don't want to keep everyone for too much longer. So I like to put Stephen on the spot when I've got him on the show. I like to do this with Jonathan as well. Let's look at the Western Conference just now. Who's your tip to finish the regular season on top, and who do you think will be the Western representatives in the MLS Cup as things are currently shaping up?
I think it is hard to make a case for anyone else besides the Seattle Sounders.
I thought you would say that, and I don't really disagree with you.
I think Portland could beat them. I think Portland has a great squad that might be built specifically to counter what Seattle does. But I don't know if anybody else in the conference has displayed the level that Sounders have. It will be interesting to see what happens to Seattle when they play a side who is better defensively, like SKC or Minnesota, maybe.
I was going to mention that because part of this weirdness is the schedules are skewed because not every team is playing each other. So you've already had the Whitecaps playing 6 games against Eastern Conference teams, for example, not taking points off their rivals. The flip side of that is they haven't lost points to their rivals at the same time. But then you've got the fact that the Whitecaps, I mean, they've only actually got 8 games left to play. I thought it was 9. So who they're playing in their remaining games are San Jose, RSL, LAFC, LA Galaxy, San Jose again, Seattle again, Portland, and the Galaxy again. So they're not playing Houston. They're not playing Colorado. They're not playing teams that they would maybe want to be playing to try and take some points off them, like Dallas. So they've lost out on that. KC as well are in a mishmash where they're even playing Eastern Conference teams. They do have Pulido back because he's been back and he was scoring tonight. So I think the only thing for me that might stop Seattle just now is Johnny Russell and Sporting Kansas City. What do you think of that, Stephen?
Oh, sorry. Great. Thank you. Yeah. I think the best thing Seattle has going for them is they get KC at home, most likely, if things go the way that they have been. I think if Sounders get to host playoff games, that's going to be tough to knock them out. I don't really know what to tell you, except for this is comfortably the best side Seattle's ever had, and they've won 2 MLS Cups before. It doesn't mean they'll do it again, but they're head and shoulders above that's what I can say for certain. They're head and shoulders above anything they've ever had before.
And are you going to play Toronto in the final again, Stephen?
I think that would be hilarious. I'd much rather have it
No.
happen here. I don't really want to figure out if I'm flying to Connecticut or Toronto or New Jersey on like 10 days notice. But
would you do that? Would you go?
I've made the other ones. If it's in the US, it'll be hard for me not to. I found out I just started class a couple days ago for fall quarter, and it turns out my calculus final is on the same day as MLS Cup. And you can call this cocky, but I've already put in that I'll be busy.
That's confident. I haven't booked any time off for the Whitecaps.
Will they actually play the final in the home stadium, or will they play it in a neutral site too? Because I'll use baseball as an example. Baseball has decided to play their playoffs in a neutral site and kind of bubble it again.
We were
That's
talking about
interesting.
this. Is Toronto going to play in Connecticut? Are they going to play in New Jersey? Are they going to move them to DC or Atlanta or Orlando? I mean, who knows, right?
Yeah.
You guys are missing the most important thing. Steven, wait, when you have an exam, how do you get out of it?
So you email the professor like the very first day of class, and you're like, man, I got to work the day of the final, and you see what happens. And you can call me crazy. I'm going to take the class next quarter if they won't let me move it. But it's not that I think Seattle's going to be in there necessarily. It's that I think there's a pretty good shot it's Seattle or Portland, and that'll make that day very busy for me.
Yeah. Awesome.
I mean, as Steve and Zach know, one of my happiest memories from last year was celebrating in the Sounders locker room with Stephen Fry and just getting covered in champagne. It was great. Zach, you loved me telling these tales about that.
I love Steve's gift that he sent today about that.
Yeah. Well, last thing I want to mention just about the West and KC. The last 2 weeks on my East 5 podcast, I've had a guy called Danny Swanson and a guy called Kevin Smith, who were both at Dundee United with Johnny Russell. So you can imagine me going, what was Johnny like? Oh, what was he? Was he a really great guy? And yeah, he was. The last thing I want to talk about with MLS, have you guys heard what happened tonight in the DC United match against Atlanta?
No, I haven't heard anything.
Does it involve Jordi Reyna?
No, surprisingly. But
No.
we were talking about bad refereeing. How is this for bad refereeing? DC United made 2 halftime substitutions.
I heard about this. Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
I do know about this.
One of them was a guy called Russell Canoose, who wasn't on the list of substitutes and played for 4 minutes before someone realized he wasn't an eligible sub. They then spent 10 minutes checking their phones and the rules to see what they could do about it before pulling them back off and letting another sub come on. MLS.
What was the final score?
Let me check that actually. I think
The app open.
they were trailing 2-0 at half time. I don't know what the final was. Let me just get up the top of the page here. Where are we?
They lost 4-0.
Oh, yeah.
So at least you know Atlanta won't be requesting a forfeit 3-0.
I was going to say, for the integrity of the league, they've got to go with the forfeit, right? It's like the only time you'll ever see the recipient protest. Wow.
I don't know. I think Phoenix should be protesting at being given a 3-0 win after what happened in their game against San Diego. They're losing 3-1. Most folk will know this, but if anyone doesn't, there's a homophobic slur thrown. San Diego walked off the pitch and they lost the game because they walked off the pitch 3-0. And the Phoenix head coach didn't see what all the fuss was about and just wanted things to go on. I'm paraphrasing ever so slightly. Their head coach had said something like, "It's soccer, man. These things happen." Unbelievable in this day and age.
I watched the YouTube video that you posted, or the video that you posted on Twitter.
Oh, with the subtitles, yeah.
It's I mean, like, that was unbelievable. Like,
Talking about referees having a nightmare as well, because he sends a guy off that's been abused because he's misunderstood what's going on. It's like,
yeah, it was crazy. USL really needs to step in and do something.
That's what I wanted to touch on. I thought that was really troubling, the initial officiating, where like you're supposed to prepare for your referee assignments, right? And like, frankly, you should know if you're going to be refereeing a game that has the only out player in American sports participating in it, okay? And to then, the way I understand it, Martin goes, "Did you call me and then uses, I believe, the slur that was used against him. For the referee to not realize and to not process in the moment that the only out player in North American sports is not going to use homophobic slurs against his opponent. To me, that was so troubling in and of itself. And I really think that initial decision needs more analysis there. And I'm really troubled by that.
Yeah. And it comes a week after, or I think it was a week after, maybe 2 weeks after LAFC 2, no, LA Galaxy 2, sorry. One of their players had racially abused one of the San Diego players. So if there was any team that was not going to do a slur of any kind, it was going to be San Diego. But I mean, Landon Donovan, we've given him a lot of stick in this show. He's not Mr. Popular in North American soccer. Nothing but respect for what he did in that circumstances. He was just so confused. And he gave the Phoenix head coach a chance to sub off the player.
Yeah.
He said, if you don't sub him off, we're gonna take some action. And he's like, no, I'm not taking him off.
And then the opposing coach tried to, even a couple of days later, tried to backtrack what he was saying. But it was clear what he was saying, especially like you said, that ESPN, the fact that they subtitled it and got the audio up and everything like that. It was clear what he was talking about. So yeah, good on them to take a stand and basically walk off the pitch.
And then what about the Phoenix owner inciting some type of fake conspiracy that Martin apparently cooked up, according to the owner? Did you guys see all that
I've not heard.
Oh my God, you guys have to see this. This was the most unbelievable part. The owner goes and texts somebody and starts accusing Martin of having made this up and manufactured this. Oh my God, if you give me just a minute, I'll pull it up. Here,
sure.
wait just a moment for me.
Well, while you pull it up, I was going to mention that even if he did make that up, the way that his teammates came to his defense shows that it wasn't made up. Like, you couldn't make that stuff up. And the fact that they walked off the pitch, it's not like they were looking for an advantage of any kind either in the game. Like you're talking about subbing the player off.
Yeah,
they could have subbed the player off, and he wasn't even asking for him to be sent off and go down a man or something like that.
They were already 3-1 down in a game anyway. But the other thing, like, I was talking to someone on Twitter about this as well, because they said, well, let's hope they really throw the book at Flemings for this. The problem USL might have is the referee didn't hear the original slur. As far as I know, it hasn't been picked up on audio. So if there's no other witnesses, it is Fleming's against Colin Martins, and it's then him against him. So I don't know how much USL can actually do to punish him if they've only got the two people saying, I didn't say that, you did say that. That's where things could get a little bit messy for USL.
Yeah.
So I guess Steven's still trying to find it there. So
yeah, that is a potential. You're right, Michael. If it turns into a this person said, that person said, it could be a problem. But like, yeah, I mean, you just hope that this will be resolved, and like this kind of stuff, I think, needs to not happen in football. Like, this is, I mean, and this doesn't feel like, in Italy, the excuse in Italy is, yeah, they don't mean what they're saying. They're just trying to throw you off your game.
Oh yeah.
Like, I don't think that's what this is. And because that's not part of the I don't think that's part of the culture quite in North America. And so, yeah, I mean, again, hopefully USL will be able to take action to well, I think rectify the result of the match, and then deal with the situation in a way where in a way that makes sense, and that it brings justice to the whole situation. What did you got the link, Steven?
Yeah, I sent it to the AFTN Twitter account. I'm not able to do a screen share on the Zoom call. It looks like it's disabled. It's a text string. I don't know if you guys are able to pull it up on a screen there or not. I can read it if you want, but it would probably be better if we could look at it.
Yeah, let me see. I've never tried to share stuff before. Before we get to that, just one last thing I want to say. After this all broke on Twitter, I went onto YouTube and I put the stream back and actually watched it all play out as if it was in real time. And one of the really bad aspects of the coverage of it was they kept focusing on a Phoenix player, Santi Moore, their Spanish forward. So I thought he was the guy that had made the slur because it constantly focused on him. And he was like separate from his teammates and everything. And I was like, oh, so I went to bed thinking he was the player that had actually made the slur, and it wasn't, which they need to kind of work on things like that. So let me see what I can do for sharing the screen here.
Here, I will send the link in the chat here as well now. Sorry about that. There we go.
Okay, I have no idea what's going on, if we've got things screened or not.
There you go. Got it. Perfect.
I guess if I put this up.
Yeah. So here are this guy's messages. This is apparently the owner of Phoenix Rising FC, but this is pretty bad. So.
Oh, I've just realized that I can't then change screens. Hold on a second. Now I can't get back to this. I've lost my Twitter. Here we go. So yeah, if everyone can see that, we'll just read a little bit. He said, I want to speak to you personally because I appreciate you engaging. Do you believe him? Yes or no? I don't know who to believe. Our player and his teammates who were able to hear completely deny him saying it. There is a big backstory to SD this week after their match last week. You know the story of that match, yes? So this is Brandon McCarthy, who's the owner of Phoenix. And who is he talking to?
He is speaking to Mike Dickerson, who I don't particularly know if Mike Dickerson is a sports journalist or not. I believe he might just be a Phoenix Rising enthusiast.
Oh, wow, interesting.
No, I'm sorry. Appears to be in LA. Looks to be LA based.
Okay.
I cannot tell you why Phoenix Rising's owner has chosen to engage in this. There is no clear reason. I don't think.
Bizarre. And then it says, your statement clearly implies you believe your player, making you a biased actor in this drama. You didn't choose to highlight the other side's info, just your own. You could have waited to say anything. Why are you even on Twitter? Shouldn't you be talking to your players, coaches, etc.? And then the owner replies, okay, well, they wanted to forfeit tonight's match. We only found out Monday night that we were playing. They wanted to continue their statement. Then this happens. It's the context behind things that we don't understand. Oh, and then the guy says, are you accusing San Diego of making up a slur to forward a narrative as if they wanted the game called off? They were leading 3-1. Anyway, we don't know. How can we? If our player and the rest of our guys say it didn't occur, the ref told our player he didn't hear him say it, what are we supposed to believe? And this then comes back to what I was saying, the issue of it's a he said situation. And what do USL do in that case? And then the Dickerson guy says, this is worse than the slur. You're accusing the only gay male player in major pro sports of making up a slur for publicity. If he's found to have said this, he's gone. My hope is we're in fact finding mode. We just need to know what actually happened. He says, your tweet suggested you believe your players. That's not fact finding. Also, you made up a conspiracy theory out of thin air. I said he unequivocally denies it, and a statement is coming. That's just passing along. It doesn't say what I believe. I get how it looks. I know how I look. It's not good. You just claimed there may be a conspiracy to make your team look homophobic. Do you have any evidence for that? Do you understand how serious that claim is in context? There also may not be. There's a chance our player is lying to us. My point is that we're trying to find out what really happened so we can act. So why the hell go on Twitter? Wow. Crazy.
So I hope that was worth your time anyways.
That was
one of
that's
our little group chat thought that was one of the craziest things we've ever seen. So
not a lot leaves me speechless. That's like, I don't understand an owner engaging. Like, I don't know how well he knows this guy.
Yeah, he's not even engaging a reporter or anything like that. He's just encouraging a regular person. He should actually close his DM so nobody can access them or something like that.
Did he not think the guy he's messaging was going to put all that stuff out there?
Yeah, it doesn't mean. Maybe he thinks DMs are private or something like that.
I don't know. Anyway, that is it for the MLS chat. We will be back in the final part of tonight's show, talking a little bit of Gold Cup and hearing some audio from John Herdman and Greg Berhalter. For those of you listening on the podcast, we'll be back with that after this. for those of you watching and taking part, have you got time for 5 more minutes quick chat about Gold Cup?
Sure do.
Okay. So on the podcast, I will have played the audio by this point. I jumped on the call with John Herdman, and then the woman hosting the call unmuted my mic to ask the next question, then went to someone else, and then my hand had gone down, and I didn't know that, so I never got to ask John Herdman a question, but I did get to ask Greg Berhalter a question. Weird. Anyway, what was your guys? Well, first of all, did you guys watch the draw? Was that
No,
not painful as hell to watch?
I missed it.
Oh, you're lucky.
But it was better than I think, what was it, Alexi Lalas or someone admitted that finally this is the first time they've actually had an actual draw, that all the other draws were just choosing what they wanted or how they thought it would work best or whatever. But yeah, it wasn't as some of the other draws, you Champions League and World Cups and whatever, but it wasn't, I don't know. I mean, it wasn't enthralling, but it wasn't terrible. I didn't think it was terrible.
I just find it a tough watch. So let's get to the main thing we want to talk about here. It's thrown up, America against Canada. The balls were coming out. I was really hoping for Honduras as number 1 or Costa Rica. When they both went, I was like, great. You've got a choice of America or Mexico. And we got America. 1-1 in the last 2 games against them. But it's also Martinique and someone that qualifies from the playoffs.
Isn't it likely Haiti?
Is that who it looks like it might be? That makes it a slightly tougher group then. What was your thoughts, Stephen, on another American-Canadian matchup?
Michael, it's hard to say. The thing that 2020 has done for me is it has trained me to not display so much hubris about how far in the future I am able to prognosticate. It is almost impossible for me to imagine what next July will look like, let alone what a specific soccer match in it will do. Maybe it'll be 11 elephants against 11 giraffes. I don't know.
They should be good in the air, though.
There you go. No,
better defending set pieces than the Whitecaps.
I think Canada's come along. I think that it's hard to assess exactly where the U.S. is right now because their generation's so young and they haven't been tested so much yet. But it's the overwhelming emotion for me. It's too far away to know anything.
Steve, what do you get excited by a American-Canada matchup?
The thing is the one positive you can look at it is if they do, the top 2 teams advance from each group, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I think it will be,
if the top 2 teams advance and that means that they avoid them in the knockout stages in that case. So you could look at it a positive there. But honestly, if Canada wants to make a name for itself in CONCACAF, sometimes you got to, play the best, whether even if you don't defeat them, if you're competitive against them, play better than what you have in previous years. I know they just beat them recently, but to beat them or be competitive on U.S. soil, that's something that they're going to have to do eventually, whether it's next Gold Cup, the Gold Cup in 5 years or 6 years or 7 years. I don't know how often they do these things, but they're going to have to do it, especially considering the Gold Cup's always in the U.S. So, yeah.
What both head coaches talked about, Zach, was they don't actually know what players are going to be getting next year because you've got Olympic qualifying, you've got World Cup qualifying, you've got the Gold Cup that may or may not fall within a window for getting players released, and it's the summer. You also don't know what international travel is going to be like. You could find this is a tournament played with just domestic Canadian and American players and Mexican players, which could put a whole different spin on things.
Yeah, there's a lot of unknown variables, like all facets of our lives right now. And we've sort of talked in the past, but I really wish that Canada, and I don't know how the schedules overlap and all that kind of stuff, but like you talk about like Olympic stuff, like I think, to me, Canada should go all out in something like the Olympic tournament. You know what I mean? Like they have so many good young players. I'd rather see them excel at that than, you know, get to the knockout stage or the quarterfinal or semifinal or even final of the Gold Cup. Like how?
But that's the other thing, is like, who do you play in what tournament?
Well, in the past, the approach has always been you always push the person to the highest level, you know, that they can, which we've seen, you know, the Whitecaps do with their residency program, which I believe it cost them at least one title for the residency team, right? Yeah, I don't necessarily think that's the best. I think you can one, I think you can help build the culture of winning, and winning, not just winning matches, but winning something tangible. And two, I think it also helps those players like those players gel together, those younger players.
Because you're right. 5 years later, they're going to be playing in that with the World Cup.
Yeah.
In 2026. So why not put that strong group of players that are U23s together in the Olympics? 5 years later, they're going to be, you know, 26 to 28 in their prime, and they've already played in one tournament, like a high-end tournament like that in the past. So I think it's a good idea.
I think they should do that. However, I fear they're not. They're going to get the best players they can to play with the first team, and the Olympic team will suffer, and that could potentially even keep them from qualifying.
Well, we don't even know if they will be in Olympics next year as well. I mean, as Stephen says, it's just hard to imagine what next year's going to even look like right now.
Like I'm at this point not sure if there's going to be a World Cup in 2022. They might have to delay that.
How do you guys judge the relative value of the next Olympics and the next Gold Cup for Canada? You know, I'm just listening to Zach. I guess maybe the counterfactual would be like, what if you took like the under 23 group and played them in the Gold Cup instead of the Olympics?
Stephen, the thing for me, the Gold Cup is, I think I've mentioned it to these guys before, that I've always thought of it as a popularity contest, where the TV executives all want the U.S. and Mexico to be in the final no matter what, and they don't want any other variants to the thing. So for me, the Gold Cup really has very little value. I put, when Zach mentioned the Olympics have way more value to me than the Gold Cup at this point.
Yeah. I mean, as a non-Canadian, the Gold Cup for me doesn't have a high priority. If I was a player, I'd rather win an Olympic medal than win a Gold Cup, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And so the other thing about it is it not just for the players, but for the excitement in the country. In Canada, you'll get far more engagement and far more connection to the people if they were to make the Olympics and do some damage at the Olympics than even if they won the Gold Cup.
That's very true, actually. Yeah, because more folk in Canada watch the Olympics than I think probably the Stanley Cups maybe got more, but even that, I'm not sure.
I'll even use this as an example. It was the 20th anniversary this year of them winning the Gold Cup, and nobody even mentioned it. And not only that, me and Michael were talking about, we'll do a recap of it in June or whatever, July.
Yeah.
And then we realized that back then it was played in February.
It was February.
So we already passed the actual 20-year anniversary, so there's no point even recapping it at this point.
Anyway, we'll see what happens. Just before we wrap things up, and I'll splice this into the podcast in the Whitecap section, huge thanks to Naveed. He's got the stats together that I asked for on Carol Robinson's last 50 games compared to Robbo's first 50. And it's not good news for MDS. It's quite damning, actually. So Robbo had 20 wins to MDS's 13 draws to 11, and lost 19 to MDS, losing 28. Robbo had a 38% winning percentage in his last 50 games that saw him sacked. MDS has a 25% winning percentage in his first 50 games. That his future just now is, I guess, up in the air. That's quite fun to me.
It is, but again, I reiterate that it's a better example to compare them to the 2011 Whitecaps, where they were you go compare two expansion teams, basically.
it's still, yeah, it's just when you put those stats out there.
Yeah, they don't look good. I
Yeah.
agree with you there. They don't look good on the surface.
Fired Robbo because they couldn't score goals, right? And it's just like I just feel like there would be a lot more tolerance for losing if you're doing it, scoring 2 or 3 times a game and getting blown, giving up 4 or 5, right? Like at least it would be exciting, and Caps would score a lot and it'd outscore people sometimes. But like,
no, that wasn't that the point that Robbo was let go, was because they weren't exciting, and
that's what
MDS
I'm saying,
was
right?
good. Yeah.
Well,
That
they were
was the whole
also
point.
they were
Yeah.
on a losing streak and were not going to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
That was the main reason that they got rid of him, I think.
And season ticket renewals were coming up.
Yes,
But like,
and they had to have their gimmick. What was that, Stephen?
I was just going to say, keep finishing third bottom, second bottom, last in the West, whatever it is, but do it scoring a bunch of goals, and that'll be more exciting. That'll be progress.
My wife has just joined us. Do you want to come on the podcast? We're still live on YouTube. Now she's gone mute and is not speaking. Do you want me to get you on camera? Now she's running away. Okay, I think we'll maybe just wrap up just now then. Thanks to everyone who has been watching on the stream. Thanks, Stephen, for joining us as well tonight. I mean, I know it must be tough. Your commander-in-chief's not doing too good. It must be tough for you to come and do a YouTube stream, but we really appreciate it. So just before we go, let everyone know where we can find you online. You can go first, Stephen.
Thank you so much, Michael. And I woke up yesterday and I thought to myself, man, maybe I should have wished for $1 million before I went to bed too. Right? Okay. Well, anyways, no, you can find me on Twitter at Steven_Agen, AGEN. You can find our podcast, Radio Cascadia, which Michael is a frequent guest, at Radio_Cascadia on Twitter. You can also check us out at RadioCascadiaSoccer.com. Thanks so much for having me on tonight, Michael. This has been so much fun.
Always a pleasure having you. I was going to cut out the intro, but now that you said something really funny, I'll have to keep that in. Zach, where can they find you online?
For me, it's at Zachary AM on Twitter. And it was also a pleasure just having you join us tonight, Stephen. Thanks for being here.
And Steve, where can they find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at WhitecapsBeat.
You can find me online, probably looking for some new accommodation for tonight, because my wife seems really annoyed that I tried to get her on a live YouTube stream. Apart from that, you can find me on Twitter at AFTN Canada, also on AFTN website if you want to get all the East Fife and Glory Days of Gold stuff and find out our love affairs with Johnny Russell's former teammates. Give us a follow on Instagram at AFTN Soccer. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like, thumbs up, all the stuff that the young kids want you to do to get the algorithms up and stuff. And we're still trying to get to 1,000. We're at 330 subscribers. We're getting there. It's a slow haul. And check out all our stuff away from the numbers, aftn.ca. So just to let you guys know, when I wrap this up, it's going to end very abruptly. So thank you so much for joining me. We'll be back soon. Hope you've enjoyed this. Until next time, thanks for listening. Take care and on the Caps. Bye, everyone.